Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Buchanan family. Molly first met Adam Buchanan when she applied for a job as an office manager at his company. At the time, Adam was divorced and raising his son, Nolen, from a previous marriage on his own. The cheerful and outgoing Molly quickly caught Adam's attention. Their mutual interests led to a romance that blossomed into a serious relationship, and eventually, Molly moved in with Adam. Molly became pregnant and their baby was named Gavin. Those who knew the Buchanans described them as a loving family of four. The patriarch of the family owned a construction company, and they purchased a vacation property in Dorado County, California, a small cabin on 19 acres in Greenwood. The rustic cabin had no electricity, water, sewer, or gas. Adam, who worked in construction, became actively involved in renovating it, and the family began visiting regularly. On September 13, 2015, at 10 a.m., members of the Garden Valley Fire Department were called to a wildfire in Greenwood Township, located on Highway 193 between Cool and Georgetown. When they arrived, they found that the fire had burned 10 acres of land, and while the cabin was still smoldering, it was completely destroyed. Fire department personnel found charred remains in the ashes. The fire scene was still intact, and at 11 a.m., firefighters contacted the Dorado County Sheriff's Office. At the time, no one understood the severity of the situation. Firefighters suspected that the victim of the wildfire was a pet trapped inside the house. When they arrived, the rest of the house was still smoldering, making it impossible to check inside. They had to wait for the fire to go out and the temperature to drop. While investigating the house, police officers detected an odor similar to that of burning flesh. Police later found a human skull and a charred torso, indicating that a tragedy had occurred. Police called for backup. Officers from the sheriff's office arrived to thoroughly investigate the scene. It became clear that the small, isolated cabin was not the owner's primary residence, but rather a vacation home. A Dodge pickup truck and trailer were discovered on a plot of land near the cabin. Police obtained the license plate number to identify the owner, who may have been affected by the wildfire. It was quickly determined that the truck and trailer belonged to Buchanan Construction, owned by Adam Buchanan. He lived approximately 160 miles away, in Bonita, California. Police were unsure whether the person inside was Adam Buchanan or someone else. The name of the company owner provided police with their first lead into the investigation. The Bonita police were tasked with checking on the welfare of all members of the Buchanan family. They arrived at the address and parked in the Buchanan driveway, where they saw a white Ford pickup truck. When the officers knocked on the door, Nolen, Adam's 16-year-old son from his first marriage, answered. He was surprised to see the officers in uniform and asked why they were there. In order to avoid alarming anyone in the house, the officers decided to first determine who was inside. Nolen explained that his father, Adam, had gone away for the weekend to their estate, 160 miles away, with Molly and their 8-year-old son, Gavin, and they were expected back that evening. According to Nolen, his father had left him in charge of the house. Police did not yet have enough evidence to confirm that the remains found in the cabin were those of the Buchanans, but the information they gathered, along with the discovery of what they believed to be 2 human remains on the evening of September 13th, was enough to report the family missing from the Dorado County fire. The following day, September 14th, Dorado County Police went to the Nolen home to conduct more in-depth interviews and identify the victims of the fire. At the home, officers spoke with Adam's parents, Howard and Susan Buchanan. They mentioned that their son, the owner of the burned-out cabin, had been coming to the cabin to do repairs himself. The parents were very concerned because they had not been able to contact their son or daughter-in-law until that time. From their statements, officers learned that the home was equipped with a generator, but that there was no electricity at the time of the incident. There were also gas tanks inside. This led to two possible explanations: the fire could have been accidental or intentional. By September 15th, the fire had cooled, allowing police to collect evidence, including debris from a nearby fire pit. Detective James Peterson of the Dorado County Sheriff's Office reported finding new remains, which changed the direction of the investigation. Police discovered a skull fragment with a bullet hole. At that point, it was clear that a homicide had occurred, and according to the sheriff, it could no longer be considered an accidental fire. The remains were collected and sent for DNA testing. In the first set of remains, a bullet was found lodged in the victim's thigh. The bullet-riddled skull was identified as that of a child. There was now no doubt that the fire had been used to cover up the crime. Police initially focused on whether anyone in his profession might have had a grudge against him. They also looked into Molly's life to see if she had any enemies who might have committed the crime. When those leads proved fruitless, police began looking into Molly and Adam's marital problems, which uncovered more problems. Police discovered that Molly and Adam's relationship had deteriorated significantly over time and that at the time of the murders, they had been sleeping in separate rooms for some time. A diary belonging to Molly detailed instances of abuse by Adam. Witnesses reported that Adam had not only abused Molly, but also abused children. Molly's mother, Susie Slanker, expressed to police that she feared that the couple might seriously harm each other during their arguments. Although Molly did not end her relationship with Adam, she would occasionally leave with her son to stay at her parents' house, returning after a few days until the next argument. It was also revealed that the couple enjoyed hunting in the area near their vacation home. Since both were armed, the police hypothesized that during an argument, one of them picked up a gun and shot the other, then, realizing the seriousness of the situation, committed suicide. There was a notable contradiction. If the tragedy had been caused by a conflict between husband and wife, there should have been a weapon found near one of them. However, no weapon was found. The police thought that the weapon might have been destroyed in the fire, making identification more difficult. For 5 days, members of the forensic team meticulously sifted through the ashes of the house. Despite a thorough search, they did not find any weapons. At this point, the medical examiner confirmed that the DNA found on the bodies belonged to Adam Buchanan, Molly McAfee, and their 8-year-old son Gavin. All 3 victims had suffered gunshot wounds prior to the fire, and the angle of the shot made it unlikely that they had committed suicide. The absence of a gun suggested that a 4th person had been present in the home who had shot the Buchanans, prompting a complete reopening of the investigation. Police turned to the victim's 16-year-old son, Nolen. He told police that the family had driven away in an old Dodge truck. Nolen explained that his father had chosen to use the company truck instead of their personal Ford, which was parked in the driveway, because he had loaded it with rocks for landscaping near their country cabin. The truck was later found near the burned-out cabin. When asked why Nolen did not go on vacation with his relatives, he explained, as he had in his first interview, that he needed to take care of the house and garden while his father and stepmother were away. Nolen also mentioned that a neighbor was illegally planting trees on the edge of the Buchanan property, which led to frequent arguments between his father and the neighbor. His father would often demand that the neighbor stop planting trees and threaten to call the police. Nolen spoke about the difficulties of the family business, revealing that the company was facing serious financial problems. The company was downsizing, with only 5 employees remaining. According to his father, debts were mounting rapidly. The investigation identified a suspect, a neighbor. The main problem was that no one could identify which neighbors were involved. The police went door to door, interviewing homeowners in the area. This approach paid off when they found a man who confirmed that he had argued with Adam about growing an illegal crop. However, he claimed that the disagreement ended after a tense conversation and that he had an alibi. After confirming the neighbor's alibi, the police investigated the family's financial situation as their business was struggling. On September 18th, police went to Adam's company to talk to the employees. Nolen's words were correct. The company was in dire straits, facing bankruptcy with debts exceeding $30,000. As a result, several employees were fired. Several of these former employees were very unhappy about being fired, making them potential suspects in the case. This aspect provided an important lead for the police. Over the weekend, the local high school held a community cleanup day. Students worked to clear debris from a park located about a mile from Adam's construction company. During the cleanup on September 19th, they discovered a small wallet containing Molly McAfee and Adam Buchanan's wallets and identification cards hidden under one of the bushes. There was also a .22 caliber rifle nearby. Police were dispatched to the scene immediately. The county sheriff's office has since developed a new theory. The suspect may have used the rifle to kill the Buchanans and, to conceal the crime, removed their identification from the scene. This finding is significant because it suggests that someone traveled from Bonita to Greenwood to kill the family and then returned to Bonita to dispose of the evidence and the weapon. This suspect is likely a Bonita resident. The location of the evidence near Buchanan Construction supports the idea that the boss was killed by a disgruntled employee. Police have sent the gun and bag of documents for analysis and are seeking a search warrant for the company's records and premises. During their search, police accessed a video surveillance camera located on the company's premises. Fortunately, the camera focused on the parking lot, not the company's premises. Surveillance footage showed the family had left town on Friday, so police reviewed footage from that day. They were surprised to see that Adam had hooked up a trailer full of rocks to a Ford F-150, not a Dodge truck as Nolen had claimed. Police discovered that Nolen had deliberately interfered with the investigation. If the white Ford had pulled the rock trailer to the cabin, then someone must have driven it back and parked it in the Buchanan family's driveway. Police decided to interview Nolen again. Nolen repeated his account of the weekend, where he had been, and who he had met, but this time they also asked him about the movie he had seen at the theater and how he had paid for his shopping at the mall. When asked how he paid for dessert on their date, Nolen said he used his father's credit card. Police then obtained a search warrant for Buchanan's Bonita home, inspected his vehicles and reviewed his financial records. They found a Ford parked in the driveway, which they carefully inspected. They noticed red dirt on the tires, which matched the dirt found in Greenwood. If the Ford had made the trip the previous weekend or earlier, some dirt might have remained. Unfortunately, the fire destroyed the tire tracks near the cabin, but the accumulation of dirt suggested the car may have been in Greenwood recently. Officers tracked the bank card transactions and discovered that Adam Buchanan used his credit card at Taco Bell on Friday, September 11th, while traveling to Greenwood. Nolen, on the other hand, claimed he was home, not with his parents, and had a credit card with him. Police went to the diner and reviewed security footage, confirming their suspicions. A white Ford was seen instead of a truck. When they searched the Ford, they found a Taco Bell receipt from September 11th showing 4 drinks purchased, not 3. Additionally, evidence at the scene of the fire showed the presence of 4 drink cups, confirming that Nolen had been in the car. The next credit card transaction occurred on Saturday, September 12th, at the Valencia Club bar in Pennon, about 30 minutes from the cabin. Adam's parents had alerted detectives to the bar, saying their son and daughter-in-law often went there after working on renovating the cabin. Security cameras recorded the moment the couple left the bar, and highway traffic cameras tracked their route. A Ford F-150 was seen heading toward the Buchanan cabin at 2:30 a.m. on the day of the fire, and then driving in the opposite direction at 3:30 a.m. In the first instance, cameras captured Adam and Molly in the car. In the second, only Nolen was recorded. Hours later, on the morning of Sunday, September 13th, Adam's credit card was used at 3 locations owned by Bonita, Starbucks, McDonald's, and a gas station. The bank confirmed to police that Buchanan had only one bank card. This information contradicted Nolen's accounts. At this time, forensic results showed that Nolen's fingerprints were found on the gun. He was arrested in the classroom. Nolen Buchanan pleaded not guilty to the charges against him and attempted to twist the story by claiming that his father had shot his family. He said his father had pointed a gun at him, and in self-defense he took the weapon away, accidentally shooting his father. Nolen maintained that it was self-defense, claiming that the fire and his subsequent lies were due to his panic and extreme fear. He explained that he had doused the house with gasoline and set it on fire to cover it up. The defense repeatedly pointed to Adam's abusive behavior toward his son and other family members to the jury. The medical examiner raised doubts about the verdict, noting that the gunshot wound to Gavin's skull indicated it was fired at a nearly 90-degree angle. Nolen, meanwhile, claimed that he and his brother's beds were next to each other and that they were both awakened by noises and screams. At that point, Nolen allegedly saw someone enter the bedroom and shoot Gavin. The shooter then pointed the rifle at Nolen, who was able to push the attacker away. According to this account, the shot would have come from about a 45-degree angle, which is inconsistent with forensic evidence. The prosecution believes Nolen shot his younger brother Gavin while they were home alone, as their parents were at a bar. After waiting for their father and stepmother to return, Nolen shot them as well. The position of the bodies suggested that Adam was killed first, followed by Molly. Nolen then took his rifle, his parents' papers, poured gasoline over the bodies, and set the house on fire. He then went home, met his girlfriend, and spent the day with her to establish his alibi. On July 13, 2018, a jury convicted Nolen Buchanan of 3 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 150 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sarah McLean. Harold Sasko was born in Titusville, Florida, on September 11, 1961, and later became a resident of Kansas City. His family had 12 siblings, and he was known to be responsible and help his siblings with housework. After college, Harold opened his own pizzeria and expanded his business, opening 2 more restaurants in Lawrence and Topeka. In 1990, he relocated to Lawrence with his then-wife Anna and their 3-year-old daughter Mendez. Following this move, he also launched a 3rd restaurant in the nearby city of Topeka. However, his dedication to his business led to problems in his personal life, causing a rift in his marriage and eventually a divorce. Harold was a respected member of his church and prided himself on being a dedicated man. Those who know him find him to be kind, thoughtful, and meticulous in his management work. However, on January 17, 2014, Harold vanished unexpectedly, leaving behind many unanswered questions surrounding his disappearance. The day started like any other Friday, with the weekend just ahead. People continued to go about their daily business, including the staff at his pizza shop. However, when they arrived at work, they found the restaurant deserted and quiet. Typically, Harold would be there to open the kitchen, but he was nowhere to be found. What's more, no one had heard from him in several days, which was unusual. Concerned for Harold's safety, staff contacted police and asked them to check on him at his home on West 26th Street. Later that day, an officer visited Harold's residence, knocking on the front door and window, but receiving no response. The officer then looked inside and saw a man lying face down on the floor. Police entered the house and confirmed the man was Harold. He was lying in a pool of his own blood and had clearly been dead for several days. Moreover, the scene suggested that Harold's death was no accident. His hands were bound behind his back with zip ties. indicating that someone had intentionally restrained him. His legs were also tied, further suggesting a deliberate act. The most disturbing detail, however, was the deep gash in his throat, which had severed the bone and made survival impossible. The officers were confronted with a gruesome scene. In addition to the ties and the fatal wound, the police found several empty bottles at the opposite end of the room, as well as a phone and laptop that didn't belong to Harold. They also noted that Harold's car was missing from the driveway. One peculiar piece of evidence was the word "freedom" scrawled on the wall in Harold's blood. As the police presence in the Harold's house, this attracted the attention of curious neighbors. The officers decided to use this to their advantage by asking more questions. Through these investigations, that they discovered Harold wasn't living alone. Neighbors reported that he was living with a girl he referred to as his stepdaughter. This information proved crucial for the investigation, as it revealed that there was someone who not only knew Harold well and had regular contact with him but was also likely present at the crime scene. It was eventually confirmed that the stepdaughter was 18 years old Sarah McLean, who had been living with Harold for the past 2 years. However, Sarah was missing. This caused the police to become suspicious. Finding her became a top priority, as her disappearance left many unanswered questions. She could have been a victim, witness, suspect, or none of these. It was crucial to locate her. Then police notified Harold's family and friends about the incident. A funeral for Harold was planned for February 8, 3 weeks after the incident. The police asked the public to contact Douglas County forensic investigators with any information about Sarah's location. A $1,000 reward was offered for any information that could help find her. Sarah McLean was born on July 9, 1994, in Topeka, Kansas. She was raised in a loving family with her parents and 2 siblings. And she had an especially strong bond with her sister. As a child, Sarah was known for being shy and kind. She spent most of her childhood being homeschooled, which limited her social circle to her neighborhood. However, her life took a challenging turn when her parents divorced during her teenage years. This significant change had a profound impact on Sarah, making her more vulnerable. As she adjusted to her new situation, she encountered challenges that made her teenage years even more difficult. After her parents separated, Sarah's previously sheltered life left her vulnerable to people who exploited her innocence. Sadly, she experienced abuse from a neighbor, which altered her personality and behavior. Her mother was deeply concerned about this change, because she found it difficult to adapt to the new way of life among them. Sarah started secretly leaving her house at night to spend time with a bad crowd. This led to her frequently using drugs and alcohol to cope with her emotional pain. After her parents' divorce, Sarah, 14, no longer wanted to live at home and found a job at a pizzeria to start a new life. Her manager, Harold, 50, initially seemed kind, but rumors among staff suggested otherwise. He told other managers to only hire young, attractive women. While working at the pizzeria, Sarah's routine consisted of waking up, going to work, spending time there, and returning home. However, she often spent her nights drinking before going back to her family's house. Reports indicate that Sarah was usually sober only at work, but even then, her work efficiency is still not high. Despite frequently showing up drunk and nearly getting fired multiple times, she kept her job, likely because Harold felt sorry for her and knew she needed support. When Sarah turned 15, she experienced another traumatic incident, where a man attacked her and burned her with cigarettes. After that, Sarah's mental health, which was already fragile, deteriorated significantly. She stopped attending work, lost friendships, and fell into a deep depression. Within a year, at just 16 years old, she attempted to end her life. Thankfully, her family found her in time and called for medical help. Following a 5-month hospital stay, Sarah made a full recovery. Upon her hospital discharge, Sarah was touched by the support she received from her loved ones and friends. Among the messages of support she received, one in particular caught her attention, a message from Harold, who used to be her supervisor. Harold offered to be Sarah's confidant, someone she could confide in. He would drive her around, take her out to eat, and listen to her problems. Since Sarah had no one else to turn to, she eventually accepted Harold's help. During one of their outings, Sarah opened up to Harold about her past, sharing her traumatic experiences with men, her drinking, and other struggles. Harold realized that she wanted to move out of her family's house. Upon learning about Sarah's traumas, he suggested she move in with him. Although the offer raised some concerns, Sarah was in a vulnerable state, feeling lost and hurt. Harold's offer provided her with an escape, and at 17 years old, she agreed to live with him. Sarah's life seemed to settle down after she moved in with Hal. She found a new job, away from the pizzeria, and Harold took good care of her. Her dog moved in too, and she even thought about attending college. However, Sarah's mother, Michelle, was not pleased with the situation. She found Harold odd and the whole story suspicious. Whenever Michelle wanted to discuss this issue with Sarah, their conversation would become tense, and they would argue loudly, causing Sarah to distance herself even more. Michelle doubted that Harold's intentions were as pure as he claimed. She worried that Sarah was too naive to see the potential issues. After her parents' divorce, Sarah's father had cut off all contact, leaving a void that she was trying to fill. The situation became even more unsettling when Harold asked Sarah to call him Dad and told their neighbors that she was his stepdaughter. As the news spread, Sarah's colleagues started asking about her relationship with Harold. Sarah would tell them that he was just a friend, but from the outside, it seemed unusual for a 50-year-old man to take in a troubled 18-year-old girl. Her peers likely suspected that something was off. After Sarah turned 18, she felt uneasy as Harold's behavior changed drastically. He started buying her alcohol and illegal drugs, made jokes about them being in a romantic relationship, and even suggested a sexual relationship. Harold kept a record of everything he spent on her, including rent, cosmetics, and substances, in an attempt to make her feel indebted to him. He made it clear that she couldn't leave until she paid him back. As a result, Sarah felt trapped and eventually gave in to Harold's advances, leading to a 10-month period of a sexual relationship with the man she once considered a father figure. They had sex several times a week, and Sarah's only way to cope was to consume alcohol and use substances, further increasing her debt to Harold. Harold's behavior was inconsistent, often criticizing Sarah one moment and complimenting her the next. For instance, he would mock her appearance, specifically her nose, and then offer to pay for plastic surgery, which Sarah, unsure of herself, eventually agreed to. Harold treated her like an object he owned, rather than a person with feelings. He exerted control over her by covering expenses, including $16,000 for dumb implantation and planning to spend another $16,000 on breast implants. These costs would be added to her debt, forcing her to pay him back when she was financially able. Feeling trapped, she felt she had no way to escape this situation. Harold became even more controlling and threatening. He claimed he would not let her escape, which made her mental health problems worse. To cope with her situation, Sarah was prescribed antidepressants. However, this ended up adding to her financial burden, as she also had to pay for the medication. Sarah had reached her breaking point, and her mind was haunted by dark memories of her abusive past and the terrible burden of depression. She often found herself on the brink, struggling to cope. Just when she thought she had found someone she could trust, that person turned out to be an abuser. This was the final blow for Sarah, and she began to act in ways that would transform her from victim to killer. After visiting a pet store, Sarah purchased a rabbit and signed a waiver, then took it home. Later that evening, a manager from Harold's Pizzeria visited her house for dinner and drinks. When he opened the refrigerator, he was shocked to find a rabbit carcass instead of beer. Sarah admitted to killing the rabbit and revealed that it was not her first victim. The manager, feeling utterly perplexed by the circumstances, accepted the dinner invitation out of politeness, but left for home afterwards. This was a significant warning sign that hinted at Sarah's potential for violence, but it was overlooked. It was later questioned whether Sarah was truly capable of harming a human being. Initially, Sarah was reported missing. However, as the investigation progressed, she became the prime suspect. Detectives soon discovered that she had packed her belongings, taken the dog, stolen a car, and left town. Although initially believed to be heading to Texas, Sarah changed her plans and went to Florida, drawn by the warmer weather and scenic ocean views. Based on this new information, she was officially declared a wanted person. Sarah was a prime suspect in Harold's murder and considered mentally unstable, posing a threat to others. As a result, she was the subject of a nationwide manhunt that lasted for 11 days, with many officers across the country on the lookout for her. On January 25, 2014, after evading capture for over a week, Sarah McLean was finally apprehended in Everglades National Park. She was found sleeping in Harold's stolen car with a loaded gun beside her. The police also discovered $2,400 in cash, 2 additional guns, an axe, and several knives, one of which had Harold's blood on it. Following her arrest, Sarah underwent a 3-hour interrogation, during which she confessed to the murder. According to her account, on January 14, 2014, Harold returned home from work and decided to fix the broken sound system. He requested Sarah to bring him a beer, and then another, and another. Harold collapsed to the floor in exhaustion, unaware that Sarah had slipped a large dose of sleeping pills into one of the beers he was drinking. Sarah had already made up her mind that Harold had to be killed. Sarah restrained him with zip ties, grabbed a hunting knife, and slit his throat. As a result, Harold died shortly after. Following the incident, Sarah took a shower, washing off the blood while listening to her favorite music. She then called her workplace, claiming she would be out for a few days due to a family member's passing. Sarah packed her belongings, including a photo of her sister, took the dog, and fled in Harold's stolen car under the cover of night. To avoid detection, she left her cell phone and laptop behind. During the interrogation, Sarah openly discussed her motives. She explained that she had been trapped in the house Harold's, deeply in debt to he sought to control her. As a result, she became his target, suffered abuse, and was eventually treated as his property. Sarah's anger fueled her desire for revenge, and she was willing to face any consequences to achieve it. In her conversations, she revealed a disturbing fascination with violence and admitted to having thoughts of it for 2 years. Additionally, in a disturbing admission, Sarah confessed to killing rabbits simply out of curiosity. Sarah's confessions put her in a precarious situation, as she not only admitted to killing Harold but also took pleasure in violent acts. It became evident that Sarah would have to stand trial. However, her confessions also showed that she was a woman dealing with difficult mental health problems. Therefore, it was necessary for her to undergo a psychological evaluation to better understand her mental state. The evaluation would help identify any underlying psychological disorders, in addition to her newly expressed tendency towards violence and her reports of memory lapses, during which she felt detached from her own mind. After a thorough assessment, Sarah was diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. As it turned out, Sarah had multiple personalities within her, each representing a different side of her complex character. These included Vanessa, a fierce warrior, Alice, the sensitive and emotional part, and Mila, a feminine, gentle side. However, the most tragic version of them was the unnamed individual who bore the full weight of the trauma and depression. During Sarah's trial, her defense team centered argument around dissociative identity disorder. According to Sarah, one of her alternate personalities, Alice, had suicidal thoughts but was convinced by her other personalities not to harm herself. Instead, they collectively decided that killing Harold was the only solution. The defense team argued that Sarah was in a state of clinical dissociation when she committed the crime, implying that she was not fully in control of her actions. However, the prosecution argued that despite the severity of the abuse Sarah suffered from Harold, the investigation suggested it was consensual. Despite acknowledging the authenticity of Sarah's mental disorder, the judges ultimately found her guilty of murdering Harold. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 50 years, a verdict that shocked both Sarah and her family. The sentencing decision raised concerns that the court had not adequately considered the long-term abuse Sarah endured and her mental state at the time of the crime. As a result, many felt that her punishment was disproportionately harsh. In response, Sarah filed an appeal, arguing that the court should have taken her history of abuse into account during the trial. Fortunately, by that time, more evidence of Harold's horrific behavior had come to light. Upon analyzing his computers, detectives discovered a large collection of illegal pornography. Furthermore, another woman reported that Harold had abused her 2 daughters. Considering this new evidence, Sarah's appeal led to a reduced sentence of 25 years, a 50% decrease from the original sentence. Despite this new information, Sarah remains incarcerated. The judge acknowledged that Harold had indeed abused and manipulated Sarah, but emphasized that this did not justify her premeditated murder. Initially, Sarah was a victim of Harold's exploitation. He was a master manipulator, deceiving many in with his charm. Some individuals still recall his generosity, as he had helped employees in financial. Harold's family acknowledges his wrongdoing but also remembers his positive qualities. They believe he needed help, not death. Similarly, Sarah's family agrees that she should face consequences for her actions but thinks the sentence was too severe, given the circumstances of her trying to escape her abuser. Harold was a complex individual, well-liked by many, yet with a darker side. His story shows how life's difficulties, traumatic incidents, and not having enough support can result in very unfortunate consequences. Sarah was abused by someone she trusted, suffered lasting damage to her mental health. However, this trauma does not excuse her intentional killing of another person. Ultimately, Harold's story teaches us to look beyond a person's appearance, as their true nature may be hidden. Harold, perceived as kind and generous, was actually manipulative and predatory. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Dawn Hachen. Dawn Marie Hachen was born on December 5, 1969, in Seattle, Washington. She is the eldest child and only daughter of Donald Hachen and Diana Parle. Her father worked in a shipyard, while her mother was a homemaker. Dawn grew up with her 3 brothers, Dennis, Darren, and Derek, in Bremerton, Washington. Dawn developed a strong faith from an early age. According to her mother, she accepted God into her life at the age of 4. However, her childhood was also challenging. Her parents struggled with anxiety and depression, which often led to frequent conflicts at home. When Dawn was about 11 years old, her mother, Diana, left the family for another man. This new relationship resulted in the birth of another child. However, the relationship did not last, and Diana eventually returned to the family, bringing her newborn child with her. Despite these hardships, Dawn did well in school. She worked hard to achieve good grades and overcome her challenges. Her hard work paid off when she entered the prestigious Scripps National Spelling Bee at age 12. This achievement not only led her to the White House but also gave her the opportunity to meet former President Ronald Reagan. Dawn graduated as valedictorian from Bremerton Christian School in 1988 and then attended Northwest College of the Assemblies of God Church in Seattle. During her college years, she met Nick Hachen, and they quickly formed a close relationship. However, Dawn's friends were concerned when she called Nick her other half after only a few dates, as they worried that Nick's assertive personality might not be a good fit for her. They wanted Dawn to find someone who would be unwaveringly supportive and emotionally committed. Nick grew up in Poulsbo, Washington, and his childhood shared some similarities with Dawn's. However, his family life was difficult. His father, Dan, was often distant and busy with work, leaving Nick feeling neglected. Nick's mother, Sandra, was busy with home daycare and foster care, which left Nick feeling like he was not a priority to her. He even felt that his mother favored his biological siblings and adopted children over him, leading Nick to believe that she hated him. Nick struggled with the emotional distance between his parents, especially his mother's long-term depression and his father's lack of attention. As a result, Nick lacked emotional support and connection from his family, which had a profound impact on his life. Despite his isolation, Nick found comfort and faith in the Bible and Christianity, which boosted his confidence during his teenage years but occasionally led to social isolation due to his growing self-assurance. Nick and Dawn first met in college. Initially, Dawn's friends found it strange that she liked Nick because his personality was completely different from hers. She was outgoing and confident, while Nick was not. However, as Dawn spent more time with Nick, she began to change. She was no longer the confident, independent, and driven person she once was. Instead, she became shy and indecisive, often agreeing with Nick's decisions even when they were not right for her. Although their relationship seemed unhealthy, their love for each other remained strong. Nick proposed to Dawn on Alki Beach in 1990, and they were married on April 20, 1991. As newlyweds, they moved to Bremerton, where Dawn worked as a loan officer and Nick became a youth pastor at Christ Community Church on Bainbridge Island near Seattle. Nick had always aspired to be a youth pastor at Christ Community Church, where he had previously had a good relationship with a pastor named Smith. However, Nick gradually drifted away from Smith when he found doctrinal agreement with Pastor Robert Billy Craig. Robert saw in Nick as nothing more than a tool to carry out his plan to overthrow Smith and take complete control of the church as senior pastor. Meanwhile, in 1997, Dawn and Nick faced housing problems due to frequent moves, living in houses they had renovated and sold. Dawn dreamed of having a family and a stable life. To solve this problem, Nick found a house in need of repair in East Bremerton and planned to move in, renovate it, and make it their home. However, the purchase and repair of the house put Nick and Dawn in debt. Although their relationship appeared perfect, with Dawn being Nick's supportive and accommodating wife, there were hidden problems that no one saw. Dawn even joked that if she and Nick broke up, Nick would stay with her instead of moving back to his parents' house. Meanwhile, Nick continued to borrow money from church members, putting him further into debt. He embarked on an ambitious project to start a Christian youth camp. Although the project was financially taxing, Nick committed to it because he had a strong desire to do so. Nick's story was closely related to Sandy Glass, a parishioner of Christ Community Church. When Nick was trying to find the right land to build his youth camp, Sandy confirmed once again that he had great ambitions. Sandy Glass's life had been full of ups and downs. She had faced many hardships in her life. Her first boyfriend died of an unknown illness, her father died in a construction accident, and her brother struggled with drug addiction. She married Jimmy, a carpenter, but their financial situation was strained because the family depended entirely on Jimmy's income while Sandy stayed home to care for the children. Sandy also struggled with her spending habits, often living beyond her means. This led to frequent arguments between her and Jimmy. These arguments sometimes caused Jimmy to express his frustration by yelling or withdrawing from the situation. To resolve their marital conflicts, Sandy and Jimmy sought help from the church and attended marriage counseling sessions coordinated by Nick. Nick had been the church's marriage counselor for many years. However, some parishioners filed complaints with Pastor Robert about Nick's counseling style. They were upset that Nick often asked personal questions and ignored other important issues. His discussions often focused on sexual issues, ignoring other aspects of marriage. Despite this, church members trusted Nick because he had the support of their former pastor, Smith. They felt that Nick would not have been entrusted with this role if he were not trustworthy. In the fall of 1997, Pastor Robert replaced Smith as senior pastor. Smith and his wife then left to do missionary work in Africa. Jimmy's parents, who were also church members, disagreed with his decision to seek church counseling. They were skeptical about Nick's qualifications and experience in guiding their son's marriage. When Nick focused primarily on Sandy, they became even more concerned because they felt he should focus on both of them equally. The relationship between Nick and Sandy went beyond the boundaries of a normal mentoring relationship. They spent too much time talking on the phone, meeting at church, and even outside. This made Jimmy's parents feel that their relationship was inappropriate as they interacted frequently and acted intimately. Pastor Robert's wife, Pamela, also noticed Nick's behavior and spoke to him privately. She expressed her concerns about his inappropriate behavior and advised him to focus on his own marriage. When complaints about Sandy and Nick's relationship arose, Robert had to intervene. He warned Sandy that her relationship with Nick was unacceptable and needed to end immediately. However, Sandy felt that she had a special connection with Nick. She wrote a letter to Robert, expressing her anger and frustration. In the letter, she stated that she felt Robert did not trust her. The relationship between Sandy and Nick had a negative impact on those around them. Dawn and Jimmy, along with Jimmy and Sandy's children, felt hurt by this. At one point, one of their children told Jimmy that Sandy and Nick had talked about Nick becoming their new father when Jimmy died. At church, Dawn began to share her grief with her friends. She told them about her financial situation and her desire to have children, but Nick was against the idea. By the end of 1997, Nick was romantically involved with several women besides Sandy. He spent time with them in private and on phone calls that lasted for hours. However, Sandy dreamed of the beautiful future she hoped to have with Nick. She encouraged him to invest more in the plan to open a youth camp and develop a romantic relationship with her. She believed that both of them were brought together by fate. A group of women in the congregation had tried to clear things up with Dawn, letting her know that the problems in her marriage with Nick had not been her fault, but rather Nick himself. However, her life had not turned out the way she had expected when she had married him. Back on Christmas, Dawn had woken up feeling unwell. Still, she and Nick had decided to visit her family and spend the day together. Later that evening, they had gone to Smith's house and spent time with his family. Early the next morning, the 26th, Nick had planned to go hunting with Lindsay Smith's daughter and her friends. Before leaving, Nick had met his friends at the Hood Canal Bridge in Jefferson County. After a few hours in the woods without catching anything, they had decided to return and have breakfast at a local diner around 9 a.m. While everyone was eating, Nick had suddenly become concerned and said that Dawn and he had not opened their Christmas presents. Around 9:30 a.m., Nick had left the diner and returned home. At 10 a.m., he had discovered that his wife had died in a fire. Investigators had discovered that the fire had initially started in Nick and Dawn's bedroom due to a faulty space heater. The space heater had burned fiercely and quickly spread due to the presence of newspapers and wrapping paper in the room. The situation had been made worse by the presence of multiple propane tanks on the floor. There had been a surprising detail in the story. Less than an hour earlier, Nick had told his friends at the diner that he and Dawn had not opened their Christmas presents. However, when he had spoken to the authorities, he had said that they had opened the presents the night before. Nick had explained that his wife, Dawn, had been feeling unwell and had gone to bed. He also had said he had received a propane tank as a Christmas gift. Because they had frequently renovated their home, they had to use a space heater during the winter. This type of heater often lacks modern safety features, leading to fires and deaths. The police had found no evidence that Nick's story had been false. As a local pastor, Nick had been well respected in the community, and there had been no reason to suspect him of any involvement in his wife's death. Nick's congregation had tried to support him during what they had believed was a difficult time. Pastor Robert had suggested a way to try to ease Dawn's grief through prayer. However, Nick had rejected the idea, saying he had wanted Dawn to not experience any more pain. This rejection had surprised Pastor Robert, as Nick had previously been actively involved in church activities, including exorcisms. Mary Glass, Sandra's mother-in-law, had soon become suspicious of Nick's role in Dawn's death. She had thought that Dawn's death had not been an accident. She had urged her husband to contact the police to investigate, but this had not happened. Shortly thereafter, the police had determined that Dawn's death had been an accident and the case had been turned over to Nick's insurance company. Nick had received a large sum of money from his life insurance policy. This had been a bit strange to his friends and family, but they had later understood that Nick and Dawn's large debts and Nick's desire to build a youth camp had made him need the money. Some church members had found Nick's way of grieving for Dawn unusual, but they had not voiced their concerns because they had thought that people process grief differently. The church community then had held a celebration of Dawn's life, where family and friends had gathered to share stories about her and remember her life. During the celebration, Nick had shown remarkable composure throughout the funeral. Additionally, friends who had been helping clean Nick's house had discovered pictures of Dawn hidden in the back of a closet. This had suggested that Nick had wanted to remove memories of Dawn. Nick also had begun to show a cold and indifferent attitude towards many people, including some church members, neighbors, and friends. Nick's behavior had become even more suspicious when he had quickly developed a close relationship with Dawn's mother, Diana, under the guise of mourning his widowhood. This had shocked and outraged many. Even Pastor Robert could not stand Nick's behavior and had asked him to leave Christ Community Church. This expulsion had been a huge blow to Nick and marked the beginning of troubles in his life. On April 10, 2001, Sandy and her attorney met with the district attorney to negotiate her plea. In exchange for immunity, she had to reveal a secret that had been kept since the morning of December 26. Sandy recounted that on the morning of Dawn's death, Nick contacted her and said, "I did it." However, the conversation was interrupted by another call from the church informing her of Dawn's death. After the call ended, Sandy turned to Nick to clarify what he meant, but Nick simply said, "It's over, it's over." After several weeks, Sandy confronted Nick. At this point, he confessed to his crime. He had overdosed Dawn with Benadryl and then covered her face with a plastic bag to suffocate her. Dawn was still semi-conscious and had to watch as Nick murdered her. After making sure Dawn was dead, Nick arranged the crime scene to make it look like an accidental fire. He placed old newspapers and wrapping paper around the room, underneath Dawn's body, and placed propane tanks near the bed. He also arranged the fireplace to cause a fire in order to erase any evidence of his crime. Dawn's autopsy revealed no soot or carbon monoxide in her lungs or blood. However, this result did not accurately reflect reality because Dawn's red blood cells showed signs of carbon monoxide. The person in charge of Dawn's autopsy concluded that her death was an accidental fire, ignoring important evidence. One reason for this conclusion was that since Dawn was the wife of a pastor, it was thought that Dawn could not have been involved in any adulterous behavior. Although carbon monoxide bound to red blood cells, an autopsy revealed that Dawn did not inhale smoke. However, she had overdosed on the drug Benadryl, 5 times the normal dose. Some believe that this dose was not enough to cause respiratory failure. The pathologist also suggested that even if she had been asleep, Dawn would have reacted to the increased temperatures of the fire. Interestingly, crime scene photos showed newspapers underneath Dawn's body, but this detail was largely overlooked. Nick was finally arrested on September 12, 2001, in the Kinko's parking lot and vehemently denied any involvement in Dawn's death. Nick still faced a first-degree murder charge. His bail was set at $750,000. Sandy's testimony to investigators added to the frustration with the police over the nearly 4-year delay in considering Nick a suspect or making an arrest. Sandy cooperated with investigators because she was angry that Nick had relationships with other women in the church and felt taken advantage of. She believed that God did not approve of their relationship and that therefore Dawn's murder was against God's will. Church members who were questioned described Nick's strange behavior and inappropriate relationships. They also expressed frustration that he did not buy Dawn a tombstone after receiving the life insurance money. On September 17, 2001, Nick appeared in court and pleaded not guilty. He alleged that the church had cursed him and that Pastor Robert was a much more evil influence than the police could understand. Nick's trial then began. Nick was initially charged with first-degree murder, but the charges were amended to aggravated first-degree murder, which carried a sentence of life in prison without parole. Witnesses who testified included women who had relationships with Nick and several church members who had confided in him. They provided information that helped the jury better understand Nick. They had shared details of experiences they believed involved visions and direct messages from God, but in reality, Nick had used these to rationalize and manipulate others. Smith's daughter testified, describing how she had been introduced to Nick through her father and how Nick had taken advantage of her during her teenage years. The sexual relationship between her and Nick had begun shortly after Dawn had died and continued until she had moved away about a year later. Doctors and forensic experts had also testified, noting that Dawn's body had contained important clues regarding the events of that day. However, these clues had been ignored because Nick had been a pastor. Although there had been no signs of soot or carbon monoxide, which would have been unusual for a living, breathing person in a fire, the defense had vigorously contested these allegations. They had focused their efforts on portraying Nick's ex-partner, Sandy, as a jealous and vengeful man who had fabricated the accusations when he had discovered Nick's affairs with various women. On December 26, 2002, 5 years after Dawn's tragic death, the jury had deliberated for a day before finding Nick guilty of aggravated first-degree murder. At his sentencing hearing on February 7, 2003, Nick had addressed Dawn's friends and family, asserting his innocence but expressing remorse for his actions and sharing his sorrow for their loss. Nick had acknowledged that Dawn had deserved better treatment and had been sentenced to life in prison. However, in 2007, an appeal to the state Supreme Court had resulted in a modification of his sentence. The appeal had argued that the original charge of aggravated first-degree murder did not match Dawn's actual cause of death, as she had died from strangulation. The defense had argued that Nick did not deserve a life sentence. Ultimately, the state Supreme Court had ruled in favor of the appeal and commuted Nick's sentence to 26 years. Nick would be eligible for parole in 2025 and might be eligible for early release. Dawn had gone too soon, but not forgotten. She had chosen a life with someone she had trusted, but that had not come true. Sadly, that had led to betrayal and her heartbreaking death. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Turpin family. David Turpin was born on October 17, 1961, in Princeton, West Virginia, to Betty and James Turpin. David came from a devoutly religious family and had a relatively normal upbringing. During his high school years at Princeton High School, David participated in various activities, including Bible Club, Chess Club, Science Club, and a cappella choir. David enrolled at Virginia Tech University after graduating from high school to pursue a degree in electrical engineering in Blacksburg, Virginia. Thanks to his exceptional skills in computer engineering, David landed jobs at leading defense technology companies such as Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin. Louise Turpin was born on May 24, 1968, in Princeton, West Virginia. She is the eldest of 6 children of Wayne Robinette, a preacher, and Phyllis Robinette, who worked at Walmart and sang in the church choir. The Robinette children's home environment was tense due to frequent conflicts between their parents, which led to harsh treatment. Louise and her sisters were sexually abused by a family member as children. This traumatic experience was a secret kept within the family. According to Louise's younger sister, Elizabeth, Louise played a protective, gentle, kind, and nurturing role. She comforted her siblings during their parents' violent conflicts and protected them from abusive relatives. At the age of 15, Louise met 22-year-old David Turpin at church. They kept their relationship a secret for fear of Louise's parents' reaction. However, when the truth was discovered, Louise's mother Phyllis eventually accepted their relationship, partly because David came from a devout Christian family and Louise convinced her. David and Louise decided to keep their relationship a secret from her father, Wayne, knowing that he would be furious if he found out. In January 1985, 23-year-old David visited Louise's school, Princeton High School, where he had graduated 5 years earlier. He convinced the staff to let him take Louise out of class, and she left willingly with him. They began their journey south, planning to elope. When Louise's parents discovered she was missing, they called the police. Before the police could catch up with them, the couple headed to Texas, where they planned to secretly marry. However, when they were stopped, they agreed to return to West Virginia. When they returned home, Wayne and Phyllis's reactions were surprisingly calm. Initially, Wayne was angry with Phyllis for allowing their daughter, Louise, to date David. However, when he saw how much they loved each other, he realized that it would be difficult to separate them. So Wayne agreed to let them marry on February 11, 1985, in a small ceremony in Pearisburg, Virginia. 2 years later, Louise's parents divorced and Louise's father, Wayne, took a job as the chief deputy assessor of Mercer County. After marrying David, Louise began to live more independently and freely. Louise was happy with her new life. In 1988, Louise gave birth to her first daughter, and 18 months later, their second child was born. David was then transferred to General Dynamics, and his family moved to Fort Worth, Texas. They settled in a modern neighborhood called Meadow Creek. Louise's family lived a lavish lifestyle thanks to David's high-paying job. Louise, eager to show off her family's newfound wealth, invited relatives from West Virginia to visit. Having grown up on a tight budget, Louise was happy to show off her current success. To make their visit comfortable, David and Louise paid all the expenses. The Louises welcomed a baby boy in 1991, bringing them even more joy. However, by 1992, the Louises were in debt. Despite their financial struggles, they continued to live a lavish lifestyle. In 1993, Louise became pregnant with her fourth child, a girl. In 1994, Louise's oldest daughter started first grade at Meadow Creek Elementary School. She looked neglected, with greasy, unkempt hair, dirty clothes, and poor hygiene. Her appearance made her the target of teasing by her classmates. In 1995, Louise's family welcomed a fifth child, a boy. Louise's family seemed carefree despite their financial difficulties and continued to splurge on luxuries, treating relatives to expensive meals. When Louise's younger sister Elizabeth joined them on their 1996 vacation in Fort Worth, they stopped at a casino in Louisiana on the way. While at the casino, Louise asked Elizabeth to babysit the children so she and David could gamble. They asked Elizabeth not to tell anyone about this, knowing that it was against their Christian values. During this visit, David and Louise's gambling led to losses. Tensions became apparent when David claimed that Louise had a serious gambling addiction and blamed Louise for their financial difficulties. While staying with Louise's family, Elizabeth was shocked by the family's disturbing behavior. David and Louise did not show much affection for their children and tightly controlled every aspect of their lives. Elizabeth was particularly concerned about David's behavior, as he often invaded Elizabeth's privacy by entering the bathroom while she was showering, making her feel uncomfortable and insecure. In May 1997, the Turpins had their fifth child. By September of that year, concerns about their eldest daughter and the possible signs of sexual abuse began to grow. In 1998, the family had a sixth child. Although David had a well-paying job, the family's financial situation worsened due to their frequent gambling, which caused significant financial strain. In the spring of 1999, the eldest daughter dropped out of school, as did the other children. Louise and David announced that they were homeschooling their children. In late 1998, the bank foreclosed on the family's home in Fort Worth, so Louise and David moved to Rio Vista, Texas, a less populated area. The new home that Louise and David had in Rio Vista was in serious disrepair when they moved in. It was dirty, stained, and smelled bad. Before moving into the Rio Vista home, the Louises had their seventh child. Over the next 6 years, the family added 5 more children. Over time, the parents, David and Louise Turpin, became increasingly irresponsible and abusive. They physically harmed their children, beating, choking, and whipping them with belts, often for trivial reasons such as not letting them go to the bathroom. The children were also severely neglected in terms of personal hygiene, with some only bathing once a year. Despite purchasing nutritious food, David and Louise often withheld food from their children, forcing them to starve. The parents would tease their children by leaving uneaten meals in plain sight. Instead, the children were fed cheap frozen meals, resulting in severe malnutrition. This neglect was evident in the children's slow development, pale skin, and youthful appearances that did not match their actual ages. In 2004, Louise's family moved to a nicer trailer, leaving behind their old home in Rio Vista, which had become uninhabitable due to years of neglect, garbage accumulation, and rodent infestation. In 2008, Louise Turpin, then 40, had a shocking conversation with her sister Teresa. Louise revealed that she and her husband David had abandoned their Christian education and stopped attending church. Instead, they had become interested in Satanism and used Ouija boards. Louise also confessed that she and David had engaged in wife-swapping, a lifestyle that involved having sex with other couples they met online. What was even more disturbing was that they often left their younger children at home, in the care of their older siblings, while they went out to meet strangers they had met online. This drastic change in Louise, who had always been caring and responsible, worried her older sister Teresa. Despite their financial struggles, Louise's family often went to Disneyland in matching outfits, taking lots of happy photos. Louise made sure to send these photos to her family and her parents. The only indication to Louise's family that the children were okay was through these photos, which showed them appearing happy despite being very thin. In 2014, Louise's family moved to Paris, California, about 20 miles north of Murrieta. By this time, the child abuse had reached an extremely violent level. David and Louise had tied their children to their beds with ropes. If the children tried to escape, The ropes were replaced with chains and locks. The children were locked in the room for around 20 hours a day, forced to endure the stench that permeated the air. In 2015, the family welcomed their 13th and final child. Soon after, the family traveled to Las Vegas to celebrate David and Louise's 30th wedding anniversary. Faced with the horrors of their living conditions, Louise and David's 17-year-old daughter made the brave decision to seek help by reporting the abuse to the police. She climbed out of the window and quickly called the police on the phone. During a tense 20-minute 911 call, she detailed the deplorable living conditions and the countless abuses she and her siblings endured. With photographs of their desperate situation as evidence, she waited for the police to arrive. When police arrived at the scene, they witnessed a horrifying scene: a severely malnourished girl who appeared to be about 10 years old. The girl led police to the front door, where they found Louise. Upon entering the home, police immediately smelled a strong stench that made it difficult to breathe. Despite the strong odor, police continued to investigate and made a horrifying discovery: 3 younger children chained to beds. The home was in a state of extreme disarray, with trash and dirt covering the floor because there was no toilet access. Police quickly took the younger children to Riverside University Medical Center for evaluation and care, while the older children were taken to Corona Regional Medical Center. David and Louise Turpin were arrested on January 14, 2018, for child abuse and torture. Within 4 days, they faced multiple charges. Each of them was charged with 12 counts of torture, 7 counts of abuse, 6 counts of child abuse and neglect, and 12 counts of false imprisonment. David Turpin also faces a separate charge of lewd conduct with a child under 14. Among their children, a 2-year-old child showed no obvious signs of abuse. In addition to being abused, the children were treated extremely cruelly by their parents. They suffered severe physical abuse that resulted in neurological damage. The children of Louise and David lacked basic life skills and knowledge. Although their parents, David and Louise Turpin, bought them toys, the children were not allowed to play with them. They were forced to stay up until the early hours of the morning, often until 4 or 5 a.m., and were not allowed to go to bed before that time. In 2018, the court took action against the Turpin parents. On January 24, the judge ordered that David and Louise have no contact with their children for 3 years, and that all contact be through their attorney. On June 21 of the same year, the court decided that there was enough evidence against David and Louise to proceed to trial. The trial concluded on February 22, 2019. On that day, David and Louise Turpin pleaded guilty to 14 counts including torture, abuse, false imprisonment, and child endangerment. During the trial, David and Louise had an emotional reunion with their children. The children appeared to have forgiven their parents and were affectionate toward David and Louise. Each expressed a wish for their parents to be well and shared that their lives were going well. David and Louise sincerely apologized for their past actions and expressed their deep love for their children, wishing them success in life. David and Louise were subsequently sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. As of 2022, Louise, 53, and David, 60, are both eligible for parole in 2037. The severe abuse and neglect in their home shocked the community and beyond. The community came together to support the children, giving them hope and a new start in life. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of McKenzie Leck. McKenzie Leck was born on March 8, 1996, to Diana and Gregory Leck. Her father worked in healthcare logistics and administration, and her mother was a homemaker. McKenzie grew up in El Segundo, a city in Los Angeles County, California, with an older brother and 2 younger brothers. McKenzie attended El Segundo High School, where she was a member of the swim team and played water polo. McKenzie was a hardworking student with a strong interest in art, music, and animals. McKenzie attended the University of Utah, where she majored in kinesiology and nursing and was a member of the Alpha Kappa Omega sorority. While in college, McKenzie shared her feminist views and switched her political orientation from major party to conservative third party. McKenzie worked at a biotesting company in Salt Lake City. McKenzie wanted to pursue a career in health sciences, discussed with her counselors plans to attend nursing or medical school, and expected to graduate in May 2020. The McKenzie family lived a normal life until everything changed on June 17, 2019. On that day, McKenzie returned to Salt Lake City, Utah, after her grandmother's funeral. She arrived at Salt Lake City International Airport around 2 a.m. and texted her mother, "Just landed and love you, Mom." When her mother Diana answered a few moments later, Diana discovered that McKenzie's phone was turned off. Her father Gregory also tried to call McKenzie but was routed to her voicemail, causing McKenzie's family to become very concerned for her safety. On June 20th, McKenzie's parents realized that her friends had not seen or heard from her either. McKenzie's friends reported her missing to the Salt Lake City Police Department. Over the next 2 weeks, while McKenzie's parents Diana, Gregory, and their 3 sons tried everything they could to find McKenzie in California, McKenzie's Alpha Kappa Omega sorority sisters organized search efforts in Utah. They even created a Facebook page called Find McKenzie Leck to attract national media attention to the case. As police searched for clues about McKenzie, they discovered video footage of McKenzie at the airport. She was then picked up by a Lyft driver and taken to Hatch Park in North Salt Lake, about 13 miles away. Police checked McKenzie's cell phone records, confirming that McKenzie had been at the park. Police also discovered that McKenzie had exchanged several text messages with a person named AAE, whom she had allegedly met on a dating website and planned to meet in person. McKenzie's last text message to AAE was sent at 2:58 a.m. Cell phone records showed that both McKenzie and AAE were at Hatch Park at the same time. Notably, at 2:59 a.m., McKenzie's phone stopped transmitting data or location information, indicating that the phone had been turned off. Police tracked AAE's cell phone signal, which led them from the park to his home at 547 North 1000 West in a Fair Park neighborhood. Police found that AAE's cell phone was at his home at 3:07 a.m., just 7 to 8 minutes after he picked up McKenzie from the park. Since AAE was the prime suspect in McKenzie's disappearance, police decided to execute a search warrant at his home. During the search, police discovered a newly dug area in the backyard. Inside this area, they found burned human bones, muscle tissue, and charred personal items. In a nearby alley, police also discovered charred fabric and other items belonging to the victim. After the DNA from the bones matched the DNA profile of the items found, police identified the victim as McKenzie. A neighbor reported a foul odor coming from a campfire in AAE's backyard, which was also fueled by gasoline, on June 17th and again on June 18th. This is where police found a shallow grave containing bones and tissue. Police impounded AAE's car after detecting a strong smell of gasoline and finding a red gas can in the trunk. They discovered that a can of gasoline had been purchased at a local store at 9 a.m. the day McKenzie went missing. After arresting AAE, police checked his cell phone records, which showed AAE's phone was in Logan Canyon, a location where he buried McKenzie's body on June 25th. Between 2:30 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. police searched the area and found freshly disturbed soil in a wooded area near the main road, where they discovered a charred human body. On July 3rd, the medical examiner confirmed that the body was that of McKenzie. Her hands had been bound behind her back with zip ties and rope. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the left side of the skull, and her death was classified as a homicide. On October 7, 2020, AAE pleaded guilty to first-degree aggravated murder and third-degree indignity to a human body in connection with McKenzie's death. AAE was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 5 years for indecent assault on McKenzie. AAE was also charged with kidnapping another woman in March 2018, whom AAE met on a dating website. In addition, AAE was charged with 19 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor. These charges arose in August 2019 when police discovered child pornography on AAE's computer while investigating McKenzie's death on July 2nd. The images reportedly showed children aged between 4 and 8. On October 1, 2020, AAE pleaded not guilty to these charges and the pornography charges were eventually dismissed. The tragic death of McKenzie Leck has had a profound impact on her family, friends, and the entire nation. Her cheerful personality, zest for life, and desire to make a positive impact were suddenly ended by a senseless act of violence. McKenzie's story serves as an important reminder to always be cautious and safe, especially when using online dating services. Rest in peace, McKenzie Leck. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Jennifer Schuett. Jennifer Schuett is an 8-year-old girl who has just completed elementary school. She lives with her single mother, Elaine, who has worked hard to provide her daughter with a comfortable life. Elaine always tries to give Jennifer a happy childhood, full of love and care. Thanks to that, Jennifer has become a cheerful, active girl who loves to explore and learn. However, Jennifer still has a common fear in children, which is the fear of the dark. Therefore, she often sleeps in the same room as her mother. Elaine understands this fear and is always by her daughter's side. On the night of August 9, 2009, mother and daughter slept in the same room again. But Jennifer did not sleep well, constantly turning and lightly kicking her mother, making it difficult for Elaine to sleep. Elaine woke up at 2:30 a.m. and suggested Jennifer sleep in her own room so she could rest before the new workday. But Jennifer replied convincingly, "Mom, I'm going to sleep in my own room tonight because I love you," and she went to her own room to sleep for the rest of the night. Elaine regretted the decision for a long time, but at the time, she couldn't have known what would happen next. The next morning, Elaine went to wake Jennifer but found her missing. She found the window facing the parking lot wide open. Elaine quickly called 911. When the police arrived, she said she hadn't heard any noise or screaming after Jennifer went back to her room to sleep alone. Their apartment was on the first floor, and the window in Jennifer's room looked out onto the parking lot, causing Elaine to fear that someone might have seen Jennifer and entered the room through the window. Elaine realized that their apartment wasn't the ideal place for her and her little girl to live, but it was the best they could afford at the time. However, Elaine's parents decided to help her and her daughter find a new place to live. They bought a small house nearby and renovated it. Jennifer and her mother planned to move there in a few months, and they were there the day before Jennifer went missing. After her daughter went missing, Elaine was extremely sad and remorseful. She said that Jennifer was all she had and prayed that she could return. The police worked tirelessly to find Jennifer. Fortunately, Elaine did not have to wait long for news. Around 6:30 p.m. that same day, the police received a call from parents whose children were playing in the fields and accidentally discovered a little girl. When they arrived at the scene, the police found 8-year-old Jennifer Schuett lying in the middle of a field, 5 kilometers from her home. Jennifer's condition was serious, with a cut on her throat from ear to ear, causing her to lose a lot of blood and turn pale. Jennifer was taken to the hospital in critical condition, where doctors tried to save her life. Due to the injury to her neck, Jennifer was unable to speak. After surgery, Jennifer's condition stabilized, the bleeding stopped, and her breathing was steady. However, when Jennifer woke up from surgery, her mental state changed dramatically. She began to fear all men, including male doctors, making it difficult for her to recover. During this time, Jennifer was constantly panicking and even reacted defensively when male doctors tried to approach her. Elaine tried to explain to her daughter that everyone around her wanted to help and care for her. However, Jennifer did not trust anyone. Her behavior was understandable when she finally revealed what happened to her that night. The challenge was to gently get the information out of her. Now, considering she was only 8 years old, this was really difficult. Jennifer was too scared to speak directly to the investigators, so the detectives gave her a notebook and pen to write down her answers to their questions. Because she was afraid of men, Jennifer wrote a letter to her mother, who then forwarded it to the police. Although she was only 8 years old, Jennifer's written responses were surprisingly detailed and accurate. Jennifer explained that she went into her room, turned on the lights, and began reading a book to help her fall asleep. She eventually fell asleep but was then awakened by a stranger who carried her out of the house. The stranger ran down the sidewalk with Jennifer in his arms. As soon as Jennifer realized what was happening, she tried to scream, but the stranger covered her nose and mouth. The stranger then put Jennifer in his car and identified himself as an undercover police officer. However, Jennifer's instincts told her that something was wrong. She looked around and saw her mother's car in the parking lot, which made her even more confused about where they were going and why. Jennifer had been taught that the police were trustworthy, but she had also been warned not to trust strangers. Her fear and recent experiences with strangers made her suspicious of the stranger's words, and she sensed that something was wrong. Jennifer asked the stranger to drop her off at her grandparents' house. But he refused, saying that they were not home. However, she noticed that her grandparents' car was in the driveway, which suggested that he was lying. The man stopped near Jennifer's school, about 3 kilometers from her house. He told her to watch the moon closely and said that her mother would come when the moon changed color. Jennifer waited anxiously for her mother to pick her up, but her mother never showed up. She suspected that the man was preparing for his true intentions. After 5 minutes, the stranger announced that her mother would not be coming and that they needed to drive further. They stopped at a dead-end street, where Jennifer asked the stranger to prove that he was a real police officer. She questioned him, asking where his gun and badge were. When he said that his gun was in the back seat, Jennifer turned around to look for it. That was when the stranger removed her underwear. Jennifer then lost consciousness, so she was not sure how long she was under his control. Jennifer slowly regained consciousness as she was dragged through a field, her ankles constantly rubbing against the road. The pain from the branches and rocks stabbed into her back, but she pretended to be dead and kept quiet, realizing that this was her chance to survive. Her attacker eventually let go of her legs and left her in the field. Jennifer heard him walk away, followed by the sound of his car door slamming and the sound of the engine driving away. When she regained consciousness, Jennifer found that she could not scream, and she was not sure why. She mustered enough strength to bring her right hand to her neck, where she discovered an open wound. Her hand was covered in blood. The exact time she had been missing is unknown, but it is believed that she had been lying in the field for between 12 and 14 hours. As the sun began to set, Jennifer saw the lights of passing cars nearby and heard the sounds of children. A dog approached her several times, seemingly trying to get its owner's attention, but no one came. Throughout her suffering, Jennifer was bitten by fire ants, which helped her stay conscious. Each time she woke up, she could not believe that she was not dead. Jennifer had accepted her fate, thinking that she would not survive. But everything changed when she heard the sounds of children nearby. Suddenly, something hit her leg. When Jennifer later regained consciousness, she found herself being reassured by a police officer who repeatedly told her, "You've been found, you'll be okay. Just stay with me." The officer's words provided comfort to Jennifer as she was loaded into the Lifelight helicopter. The aftermath was a challenging experience for 8-year-old Jennifer, who struggled to communicate due to her inability to speak. She had to write her answers down on paper to convey her story. Additionally, her fear of men made the situation even more complicated. To make her feel more comfortable, her mother stepped in to ask questions on behalf of the police, relaying Jennifer's answers to the officers waiting behind the door. What's remarkable about Jennifer's story is that, despite her ordeal, she was able to remember the stranger's name. She remembered the man telling her his name was Dennis and describing him as fat, with a possible scar on his face. Police also sought the assistance of forensic pathologist Lois Gibson. Although they could only communicate with Jennifer through gestures and notes, they were able to create an extremely detailed composite sketch of the suspect. The sketch was released in the hope of getting information from the public about the identity of the man in the drawing. Meanwhile, police continued to investigate the scene and found Jennifer's clothes about half a mile away, along with a man's clothes. Despite hopes of finding DNA on the clothes to catch the culprit, no matches were found. Jennifer gradually recovered from her injuries. Despite her young age, she showed incredible resilience. During her recovery, there was a moment when she was upset about a chocolate bar that she couldn't eat. She screamed in frustration and let out a weak sound. The doctors were amazed to see that her vocal cords, which had been nearly severed and were not expected to heal, began to miraculously recover. After a while, Jennifer was well enough to be discharged from the hospital. She returned home and went back to school, eventually finishing high school and college. After that, Jennifer decided to become a children's librarian. Even so, she never forgot what happened that night. Every day, she felt like she was chasing a criminal, and that the criminal could be anyone. Jennifer thought that it could be her new neighbor, or a stranger at the post office or the grocery store. She always felt like the person was watching her and would come back to kill her. Fortunately, Jennifer met a guy named Jonathan. For the first time in years, she was able to trust a man. They fell in love and Jennifer felt a little more secure. However, around that time, the clues to her attacker began to fade. The chances of finding him were slim. Her case was passed from investigator to investigator. But still no progress was made. 18 years after that terrible night, Jennifer received a phone call. It was a notice that Detective Tim Cromie was taking over her case and wanted to meet with her. Tim Cromie pledged to do everything he could to catch the criminal. Jennifer trusted him, and Tim Cromie told her that he would do everything in his power until the end of his career to get the answers she needed about this case. To help with the case, Tim decided to involve FBI agent Richard Renison in the investigation. Richard had worked for the Dickinson, Texas police before joining the FBI. Tim and Richard discovered a large amount of evidence collected on the day Jennifer went missing and shortly after she was found. Jennifer's underwear, shirt, and other items belonging to the perpetrator were particularly important, so they sent a sample of the DNA found on the clothing to Quantico, Virginia. Although the detectives knew that technology had advanced significantly in the 19 years since the crime, they understood that the age of the case could cause the evidence to not be prioritized in the lab. Despite the years, their work finally paid off. The man whose DNA was found at the crime scene was Dennis Earl Bradford, the man Jennifer had described years earlier. The 8-year-old Jennifer had described the man with astonishing accuracy, even though she was on pain medication at the time and unable to speak. Dennis Bradford, 39, lived in North Little Rock, Arkansas. His DNA was entered into the national database after an attack on a woman he met at a bar in 1996. Although he was sentenced to 12 years in prison, he only served 4. Dennis was released on parole on February 4, 2000. Less than a year later, police arrested Bradford for drunk driving less than half a mile from his home. He later remarried and worked as a welder until his arrest in 2009. Investigators Tim Cromie and Richard Renison found a lot of information about Dennis. In 1987, Dennis had been arrested in Dickinson, 3 years before the attack on Jennifer. The investigators discovered that he had 2 addresses within 2 miles of Jennifer's residence, and Jennifer was able to confirm his identity as the kidnapper. They then requested a photo of Dennis's driver's license from when he was 19. Upon seeing the photo, they were shocked because the man looked very similar to the sketch created based on Jennifer's description at age 8. On October 19, 2009, Dennis Cyril Bradford was arrested. However, he claimed that he did not remember why he stopped near Jennifer's residence or why he had mistreated her. Dennis also revealed a detail that investigators did not know. After the attack, he felt so overwhelmed by guilt that he attempted suicide with a handgun. Despite reaching for the gun, Dennis was ultimately unable to pull the trigger and decided to seek psychiatric help. During his stay at the psychiatric hospital, Dennis accidentally visited the hospital where Jennifer was still a patient, and he was very close to her at the time. Immediately after the interview, the detectives informed Jennifer of Dennis Bradford's arrest. She expressed gratitude to the detectives, especially Detective Tim Cromie and Agent Richard Renison, for their efforts and their promise not to drop the case. She also admitted that she looked forward to facing Dennis Bradford in court because he was willing to plead guilty and not drag out the trial. Jennifer was given the opportunity to choose a court date, and she chose August 10, the 20th anniversary of the attack. A turning point in the case came on May 10, 2010, a few months before the trial, when Dennis hanged himself in his cell. Jennifer faced another challenge in her life due to the trauma Dennis caused. She almost lost the ability to conceive. Fortunately, Dr. Craig Witz, after hearing Jennifer's story, generously offered her his services for free twice in late 2012. As a happy ending, Jennifer and her husband eventually welcomed their daughter Jenna and then their son Jonah. Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Valentina Tres Palacios. Valentina Tres Palacios was born on December 16, 2001, in Bogota, Colombia. She is currently studying international business and commerce, but her true passion is music. Since childhood, she has loved music and pursued this passion by studying and becoming a professional DJ. After receiving her DJ certificate, Valentina started her career in Colombia and quickly made a name for herself due to her talent and exceptional musicality. Throughout her career, she has made many friends from different countries. Valentina has had the opportunity to travel to many countries to perform and showcase her talent. She has performed with famous musicians and has toured more than 20 cities in her country. She has also participated in important international events, including festivals in Colombia, Chile, Mexico, Brazil, and Peru. With her talent and musicality, Valentina has been recognized as having a bright future ahead. She is loved and sought after across the country and regularly performs at top nightclubs. Valentina is a cheerful young woman who is always smiling and loves to party. She also maintains social media accounts where she shares her performances and updates her followers on her daily life. Valentina shares 2 important aspects of her life on social media: her growing popularity in the music industry and her romantic relationship with John Poulos, an American she met online in late 2021. As their relationship progressed, their communication improved significantly. Initially, Valentina was not looking for a serious relationship, but she eventually became attracted to John, and their relationship turned into a romance. John Poulos, a resident of the United States, showed a deep interest in Valentina's life. Valentina invested a lot in their relationship, and John supported her financially to help achieve her dreams. Valentina took a cosmetic course, which included hyaluronic acid injections into her lips. And later, enhancements to her cheekbones. John also recommended surgery and silicone breast implants, which significantly changed her appearance within a few months. These changes made Valentina the talk of the town. John sent her money regularly and eventually decided to marry her. John Poulos initially planned to move to Colombia to live with Valentina. However, Valentina became suspicious of the relationship because she knew that John was extremely jealous and had hired a private investigator to monitor her every contact and activity. By January 2023, John had committed to marrying Valentina and began arranging the necessary paperwork. He had also rented an apartment in the northern part of Bogota, where he planned to spend weekends with Valentina until they found a permanent place to live. However, on January 22, 2023, a garbage collector discovered a blue suitcase in a dumpster near a park in Colombia. The suitcase was taped shut and surrounded by several trash bags. When the worker opened the suitcase, they discovered the body of a woman whose head was clearly visible inside. The worker was so frightened by the discovery that he drove several blocks away before calling the police. The Capitol Police Department quickly dispatched a team to investigate the incident. The officers who arrived at the scene witnessed a horrific sight. The victim's body was found in a suitcase. After several hours of investigation, the police identified the victim as Valentina Tres Palacios. An initial examination of the body showed no signs of violence, no weapons or knives were found, and there was no dismemberment. However, after opening the suitcase, detectives discovered that the victim was wearing pajamas with a belt. This suggested that the victim may have been attacked while she was sleeping. Additionally, police found a black cardboard box inside the suitcase containing items that could help identify the body, including a student ID card, a password that the victim often used, and several other documents and personal belongings. Investigators discovered something strange among the items they collected. These types of documents are not often found in similar cases. After finding the suitcase containing the body, the police contacted Valentina's family and learned that she had attended a party with friends on Saturday, January 21st. Forensic examination results showed that she had been hit multiple times in the head. Her body was found with severe injuries, including heavy bleeding on the right side of her tongue and 5 cuts around her neck, indicating that she had been strangled. After Valentina's murder, the police began questioning her friends and relatives. They started asking questions about Valentina's relationships. As a famous DJ with a hot body, she was a very popular and well-connected person. Among those questioned, a friend of Valentina's expressed concern and suspected Valentina's boyfriend, John Poulos, of being involved in the case because of his excessively jealous behavior. At this point, suspicions turned to Valentina's boyfriend, John, and a closer investigation into him was launched. The police initially relied on surveillance cameras around John's home, examining his actions on the days of the crime. John Poulos arrived in Bogota at approximately 8:53 p.m. on January 19th. Surveillance cameras recorded him entering the apartment with a blue suitcase identical to the one used to contain Valentina's body. This information made John the first suspect to come to the attention of the police, as he was also the last person to see Valentina alive. When detectives attempted to contact John, the call was routed to voicemail. Valentina's family had appreciated John's calm and kind personality, and they did not think he was involved in this terrible crime, especially since John and Valentina had a wedding planned. Suspicions about John grew when investigators visited his rental apartment. There, they discovered that John had left and was nowhere to be found on Monday, January 23rd. It is worth noting that John Poulos deleted his social media pages early in the morning after Valentina's death, making him the only suspect at the time. Investigators analyzed surveillance camera footage in the building from Friday evening to early Sunday morning. This helped them clarify the events that took place. The Colombian police and the prosecutor's office also reviewed several hours of video footage from cameras in the area where Valentina and John were. Camera footage and WhatsApp conversations played a key role in uncovering Valentina's final hours. Valentina and John were scheduled to meet on January 20th. John arrived on the 19th, cleaned the apartment they would share, and then texted Valentina. Valentina and John began arguing that night because Valentina was partying while he was away. John questioned whether Valentina was with any men. Valentina refused to answer, believing he was jealous and suspicious. John eventually reminded Valentina to meet on the 20th. Before the meeting, Valentina planned to visit some beauty salons for eyelash and hair extensions to feel more confident. However, on the 20th, Valentina and John disagreed about the date and only clarified their plans when surveillance cameras recorded activities at Valentina's apartment that evening. According to the surveillance cameras, on the 20th, John helped Valentina pack her luggage at 6 p.m. when the two moved into their new home. Valentina also made a video call to her mother and said she would return after the trip. The video also showed Valentina with John Poulos, who had rented a car to transport Valentina's belongings. Valentina and John were caught on surveillance footage entering her new apartment at 7 p.m. Valentina and John were caught on camera engaging in some activities before heading home. It was Saturday, January 21st, at 1 a.m. They took a taxi to a nightclub in southeast New York where Valentina was performing. When they arrived at the nightclub around 4 a.m., Valentina immediately started working. John Poulos stayed with her while she got ready. At around 5 a.m., Valentina's performance ended, and they then went into the club's office to meet the owner, his wife, and a companion. Valentina and John left the club around 6 a.m. That was the last time Valentina's friends saw her. She walked out of the club smiling and seemingly fine. Valentina reached out to a friend by phone on Saturday and said she had no plans to go anywhere. She planned to stay home with John and perhaps go out to dinner or cook together. Valentina's last conversation with her friend was via video at 9 p.m. Valentina's mother, Laura Hidalgo, said her 13-year-old son was the last person to talk to Valentina via video. Valentina was lying in bed with John, and they appeared happy. The family has no further information about their situation. On January 21st, at 10:43 p.m., surveillance cameras in the building recorded Valentina and John. Valentina was looking out of the apartment door while John stood in front of it, looking pensive, pacing back and forth, and occasionally grimacing. John was again caught on camera on Sunday, January 22nd, at 9 a.m. This time, he left the room with 2 bags of trash, and Valentina was not seen. John then drove to the parking lot, picked up a silver car, and put the bags in the back seat. Next, he returned to the apartment, took 2 suitcases from the trunk, and brought them back to the apartment. At the apartment, a gray blanket was placed on top of the suitcase that John had taken out. It was 10 a.m. He put this suitcase on the cart for transport. A second bag was placed next to it, and in this bag was Valentina's head wrapped in a blanket. Before leaving, John observed the parking lot after parking and noticed that there was no one nearby. He also checked the area around the elevator to make sure no one was getting off. Then he quickly returned to the car and tried to lift the heavy suitcase into the trunk. Finally, he took the bag and put it in the car, then drove away. The surveillance camera recorded the car circulating at various points in the city. Around noon, John appeared to be looking for a safe place to dump the suitcase. The car then pulled into a parking lot and parked near a dumpster. At 3 p.m., John got out of the car, looked around to see if anyone was following him, then took out the suitcase, which appeared to be very heavy, and threw it into the dumpster. He then returned to the car, took out a bag, and placed it in the dumpster before closing the lid and exiting the parking lot. The car then traveled west until it reached El Dorado International Airport, where John was last seen at 4:30 p.m. The Department of Homeland Security announced a $1 million reward on Monday, January 23, for information leading to the arrest of John Tres Palacios. Colombian authorities sought Interpol's assistance in issuing an arrest warrant for John as he fled the country's borders. On January 24, Panamanian National Police arrested John at El Dorado International Airport, just as he was preparing to leave for Turkey. Colombian authorities quickly began the process of deporting John from the country after Valentina's death. More than 14 criminal investigators were involved in the investigation, gathering evidence to clarify the truth. The result of this investigation included the analysis of more than 300 hours of video footage from security cameras, conducted in cooperation with the Public Prosecutor's Office. An important discovery in the case was the finding of Valentina's cell phone near El Dorado International Airport. A security guard happened to see the phone on the grass while walking near a gas station and picked it up. After realizing that the phone did not have a SIM card, he took it home with the intention of selling it, not knowing it belonged to Valentina. However, the security guard's wife called him after realizing that the photo of the girl on the phone's wallpaper matched the photos seen on social media, as well as the photo of the young woman found dead in the trash. Unfortunately, the phone was put up for sale and repackaged because someone wanted to buy it. After leaving the nightclub, John and Valentina's driver gave his statement. The driver had been assigned to take Valentina and John to a nightclub in the south of the city. When John stopped for a moment, Valentina got into the car and shouted that she had written something. When the driver looked at her, Valentina seemed uncertain, and the driver checked his phone. The driver discovered that Valentina had warned him that she was in danger in a Spanish text message to customer service. John then asked Valentina if she was okay. While the car was being driven, John and Valentina conversed in English. The driver asked them if they were bilingual, and they answered yes. When they left around 4 a.m. that same day, the driver went to the nightclub with the couple. He then knew nothing about the incident until he was informed of Valentina's death a few days later. In the WhatsApp version open on Valentina's computer, a friend of Valentina's in Caragana provided the prosecutor's office in Bogota with conversations on Valentina's computer, which offered clues about what happened. One of the key pieces of evidence found in the investigation of Valentina's case was a discovery by one of her friends, who found the suitcase containing her body. This suitcase was believed to have been in the same location as Valentina's. The friend also said that on the day Valentina was in Bogota, she received messages from John Poulos and several selfies of him with the luggage. The suitcase John was carrying was very similar to the one investigators found in the case, though the color was indistinguishable. While it is unclear why Valentina left the WhatsApp session open on her friend's computer, the messages helped investigators understand what happened at night when Valentina was killed. Forensic investigators determined that she died of asphyxiation due to being strangled with a rope. There were also signs of violence on her body. The autopsy revealed that Valentina died in her sleep. Criminologists came to this conclusion because she was wearing pajamas. All the evidence pointed to John Poulos being present at the scene. However, in the indictment, John did not admit responsibility for Valentina's death. He argued that his arrest in Panama was illegal because he did not have a lawyer to assist him. John was not proficient enough in Spanish, and a translator was not present during the 5-hour hearing. John was charged with involvement in Valentina's death and deleted his social media accounts. John Poulos was born on May 19, 1987, in Wisconsin, USA. He is married and has 3 children. However, he also has a criminal record related to violence against women, including a restraining order from his ex-wife. One of the women who had a relationship with John Poulos revealed that he frequently visited pornographic websites, spending up to 5 to 6 hours a day on them. She also commented that John often exhibited strange behavior, such as fantasizing in telling ghost stories. Another model who interacted with John Poulos on social media said that she knew him as being from Texas, USA. She stopped contacting him after he made a strange comment, including the words jealous and death. Specifically, John asked her, "If I was at a bar, would you be willing to talk to me?" When the woman refused, John replied, "There's a chance one of us will die of jealousy." The woman also said that although John donated money to her, she never chatted with him via video because his communication style was often erratic. It's important to note that John also displayed some suspicious behavior towards Valentina. He contacted Valentina on social media and began sending her money persistently and consistently. In this case, treating women like property was a red flag that the women overlooked, and they initially trusted him. John thought he could buy their trust with money from the start. Authorities investigating the case believe that John Poulos thought that the waste disposal system in Colombia was similar to that in the United States, where he lived. In his mind, the waste would settle in a container and eventually be disposed of. However, Poulos overlooked the fact that recyclers and people living on the streets regularly rummage through trash looking for items they can sell or use. John Poulos is currently being held in a separate cell in Bogota. The next step is to prove that all the evidence links him to the crime and to find the real motive behind this horrific murder in Colombia. The criminal code stipulates a prison sentence of up to 50 years for the crime John was charged with. John Poulos was subsequently sentenced to 42 years and 8 months in prison, was banned from approaching or attempting to contact the Tres Palacios family for 20 years, and was ordered to be deported from Colombia after serving his sentence. John's defense team said they would appeal the verdict. They argued that John was innocent of Valentina's murder. Valentina's situation is similar to many others. She thought she had found true love, but it turned out to be a mistake. Does anyone feel safe connecting with strangers on social media? Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Alyssa Burkett. Alyssa Burkett was born on December 31, 1995, in Mosquito, Texas, to Teresa and Burkett and Joshua Forey. She has 3 older sisters, Nikki, Madison, and Taylor, and 2 older brothers, Landon and Tyler. Alyssa showed creative talent from a young age. At the age of 7, she dreamed of becoming a fashion designer and even made her own clothes. Her grandfather, Russell Forey, a musician, encouraged Alyssa's passion, and at the age of 13, Alyssa decided to change her career path and pursue a career in law. Russell supported Alyssa's decision. After graduating from Roy City High School, Alyssa enrolled in a local college. When she was 18, Alyssa met a boy named Andrew Bird. He was 9 years older than her and seemed to be a mysterious bad boy. Despite her family's objections, Alyssa began pursuing Andrew. The relationship was unstable and complicated. Andrew did not work and relied on Alyssa for support. However, Andrew was very possessive, constantly monitoring Alyssa's every move. Her friends advised her to break up with Andrew many times, but Alyssa did not listen. In January 2019, 23-year-old Alyssa discovered that she was pregnant with Andrew's child. This unexpected pregnancy took Alyssa by surprise and forced her to rethink her future plans. Alyssa suspected that Andrew would not be a good father in the future, so Alyssa decided to break up with Andrew and raise her daughter on her own. Alyssa dropped out of college because of her pregnancy. On December 31, 2019, her 24th birthday, Alyssa gave birth to a healthy baby girl and named her Willow. Despite the challenges ahead, Alyssa is still trying her best to be a good mother. Alyssa often shares family photos on social media platforms. People close to Alyssa describe her as outspoken, energetic, kind, and has a bright smile. Alyssa has worked hard to earn money to take care of her daughter. She is working at Green Tree, a residential real estate company. With the support of her family, especially her grandparents, Alyssa tried to give her daughter a peaceful childhood while staying away from Andrew because she considered him unreliable. However, Andrew refused to give up. He initiated a fierce legal battle to gain custody of Willow, asserting that Andrew would achieve his goals at all costs and nothing could stop him. In April 2020, just 4 months after Willow was born, a woman named Holly Elkins, 22, appeared in Andrew's life. Holly Elkins quickly moved in with Andrew and began planning their life together. Holly Elkins saw Alyssa as a rival and sought to eliminate her from Andrew's life. Alyssa considered herself the best mother for Willow. She began to feel the growing threat from Andrew and his fiancée Holly Elkins. Friends advised Alyssa to be cautious and prepare for the worst. Little did Alyssa know that her life was about to be seriously threatened. As soon as Andrew Bird and Holly Elkins began dating, they immediately launched a plan to bring Alyssa down. Their goal was to ruin Alyssa's reputation and take away Alyssa's custody of their child in order to gain custody of Willow. In text messages, Holly Elkins openly expressed her desire to eliminate Alyssa. Holly Elkins wrote to Andrew that Alyssa was controlling him, making him prioritize Alyssa, and demanding that Andrew show subservience to Alyssa. Holly Elkins viciously criticized Alyssa, calling her a liar, stupid, and a bad mother. Holly Elkins encouraged Andrew to take action against Alyssa, claiming that Alyssa was hindering their family happiness with Willow. Holly Elkins and Andrew installed a GPS tracking device on Alyssa's car to monitor her every move. Holly Elkins then anonymously called 911, falsely reporting that Alyssa was driving erratically in order to discredit her with the police. On another occasion, Holly Elkins went to the police station and falsely accused Alyssa of attacking her. To prove this story, Holly Elkins scratched her chest. The couple also hired a private investigator to find evidence against Alyssa and her new boyfriend. However, the detective did not find any evidence that could incriminate Alyssa, but Holly Elkins and Andrew did not give up. In September 2020, Holly Elkins and Andrew hid drugs and unregistered weapons in Alyssa's car and anonymously reported that Alyssa was trafficking drugs from her car. During the interrogation, Alyssa cried and insisted that she had nothing to do with drugs and immediately suspected Andrew of having a role in the plot, with the aim of discrediting Alyssa in the eyes of the police. Unfortunately, she could not prove it. Holly Elkins and Andrew planned every detail of the crime. On September 10, 2020, Holly Elkins went to a sports store with Andrew. There, Andrew bought a black raincoat with cash, and Holly Elkins helped Andrew choose the right outfit for the crime plan. On September 14th, Holly Elkins went to a pharmacy and bought dark foundation and other cosmetics to disguise Andrew. On September 19th, Holly Elkins and Andrew stopped by a hardware store where they bought shotgun shells and a large Camillus knife. Both the gun and knife would be used by Andrew to take revenge on his daughter's mother, Alyssa. During the last week of September, Holly Elkins texted Andrew frequently, urging him to carry out the plan. Holly Elkins stressed that they needed to resolve the issue. Holly Elkins knew that their relationship would be in danger if Andrew did not act. Upon receiving the text messages, Andrew put his plan into action. The search history on Andrew's phone showed that he had begun researching how to remove gunpowder residue from his hands after shooting, indicating that Andrew did not want to leave any traces. 6 days before the attack, Alyssa and Andrew purchased a used black Ford Expedition. Andrew told the seller that he would use the car to supervise a school project. On the morning of October 2nd, Andrew disguised himself as another man. Andrew wore a black raincoat and parked his Ford Expedition SUV near Alyssa's home. Through text messages provided by Holly Elkins, Andrew learned Alyssa's daily routine and determined where Andrew could find Alyssa. On the morning of October 2, 2020, Alyssa dropped off her 1-year-old daughter, Willow, at her grandmother's house while she was on her way to work at Green Tree Home Management in Carrollton, as she did every day. Alyssa parked her car in front of the office around 9 a.m. and was about to enter the house when a black SUV sped toward her car. Andrew, dressed in a black hoodie, wearing a mask and holding a handgun, attacked Alyssa. She had no chance to react before he approached her and shot her in the head through the window. Alyssa dropped to the steering wheel, her face and hair covered in blood. Despite her serious injuries, Alyssa still had enough strength to open the car door and tried to crawl toward the office door. Alyssa was trying to call for help, but her body was weak and covered in blood. Despite the critical situation, Alyssa showed incredible willpower in her final moments. Andrew quickly returned when he saw movement. He pulled a large hunting knife from his coat and attacked Alyssa, who was on the ground. Andrew grabbed Alyssa's hair and brutally stabbed her multiple times in the neck, chest, and abdomen, totaling at least 13 wounds. Alyssa died on the spot from these severe injuries. When Alyssa's co-workers ran out to the parking lot after hearing her screams, they found Alyssa lying in a pool of blood with her throat slit. They attempted to revive Alyssa using CPR but were unsuccessful. By this time, Andrew had escaped in his black SUV, leaving the bloody weapon at the scene. Witnesses described the attacker as a tall, muscular man dressed all in black with a mask or hood. Many people mistook him for an African American at the time of the attack. According to Holly Elkins, she was at home with Andrew's daughter, Willow, giving her an alibi. Holly Elkins later told police that Andrew was believed to be with her the entire time. The brutal murder, which happened so brazenly in a public place, shocked the people of Carrollton. They were puzzled about the motive for this dangerous crime. However, Alyssa's loved ones and friends immediately suspected Andrew Bird. They knew about the ongoing dispute between Alyssa and Andrew over the custody of their child. Alyssa's mother, holding back tears, reported her suspicions about Andrew to the police. She shared with the police about Andrew's threats and harassment of Alyssa, as well as the long legal battle for custody of her granddaughter. According to her, Andrew had repeatedly stated that Alyssa would not be allowed to raise their daughter Willow. The investigation into Alyssa Burkett's murder was launched. At first, Alyssa's colleagues provided details about the attacker's appearance. This man, despite wearing a mask, was tall, muscular, appeared to be muscular, and some even thought he was African American. The testimony of Alyssa's loved ones made her ex-boyfriend, Andrew Bird, the main subject of the investigation. Alyssa's new boyfriend also said that Andrew had given them detailed addresses, even though no one had told Andrew. Based on this information, police began tracking Andrew's location in Raleigh. Not long after, they saw Andrew, along with his daughter Willow, packing up to leave for an extended period of time. When Andrew got into the car, the police stopped and searched the unmarked car. During the search, they found men's boots cut into pieces and soaked in drugs. Police discovered items related to camouflage makeup, napkins with makeup on them. When police searched Andrew's home, they found a lot of evidence. They discovered the pin for a GPS tracking device that Andrew had attached to Alyssa and her new boyfriend's car. Police also found an automatic silencer for a handgun and a cache of weapons. And police also found the phone that Andrew used when he called the police to report the discovery of drugs in Alyssa's car. Police confiscated 3 of Andrew's phones. When police checked the search history of one of those cell phones, they found questions about how to disassemble a gun barrel on his hand. This suggests that Andrew was trying to cover his tracks. Police found an abandoned black Ford Expedition SUV on the outskirts of town. When they examined the cabin, forensic experts found Alyssa's blood and fake beard hairs with Andrew's DNA. The dealer confirmed that Andrew had bought the car and paid in cash. Forensic tests showed that Alyssa's fatal bullet was fired from a .45 caliber handgun found in the car. Andrew's fingerprints were also found on the handle of the hunting knife. Additionally, Andrew's handwriting appeared on GPS devices and in calls to police. It appears that the prosecution has assembled evidence of Andrew Bird's guilt. However, the complaint also seeks to hold his co-defendant, Holly Elkins, accountable. Email exchanges between Andrew and Holly Elkins revealed Holly Elkins' role in planning and inciting the crime. The investigation spanned several months, during which time the prosecution assembled strong evidence tying Andrew and Holly Elkins to the brutal death of Alyssa Burkett. In June 2022, the Alyssa Burkett murder trial began, nearly 2 years after the tragedy. The two defendants, 35-year-old Andrew Bird and 23-year-old Holly Elkins, were charged with stalking, conspiracy, and first-degree murder. A key witness was Christopher Mayo, Alyssa's new boyfriend at the time of her death. Christopher Mayo told the jury what had happened over the course of several months, including the arguments and troubles they had endured. Christopher Mayo recalled numerous occasions when Alyssa expressed to him her fear that Andrew would harm her. Christopher Mayo witnessed Andrew's frequent threats over the phone, along with lies that damaged Alyssa's reputation with social services and the police. In addition, Christopher Mayo believed that the person directly directing all of the above actions was Holly Elkins. Alyssa's co-workers and friends shared her grief. Before her death, Alyssa shared with her co-workers and friends her fear of Andrew and the feeling of being constantly watched. Alyssa even told a friend that if anything happened to her, Andrew would be the one to do it. Forensic experts presented the jury with a large amount of physical evidence linking Andrew Bird to the crime scene. The evidence included Andrew's DNA and fingerprints on the murder weapon, as well as gunpowder residue and camouflage in his home and car. And evidence of email exchanges between Andrew and Holly Elkins, indicating they had planned the crime together. Andrew's defense argued that his actions were unintentional and not premeditated. The defense also stressed that Andrew was under a lot of pressure and stress from the protracted legal battle, which had affected Andrew's emotions. However, evidence from the correspondence and the careful planning of the act refutes these theories. Meanwhile, Holly Elkins denied any involvement, offering a plea, but her testimony was also full of lies. Holly Elkins' text messages incited Andrew to take action against her rival Alyssa. In May 2023, the judge handed down the verdict. Andrew Bird was sentenced to 43 years in prison. Holly Elkins was sentenced to 20 years in prison for being an accessory to a crime. The courtroom erupted in applause as justice was finally served. Alyssa Burkett's killers got what they deserved. Alyssa family, in pain and tears, expressed deep gratitude to the journalists and the jury. Although the killer faces a harsh sentence, Alyssa Burkett's family cannot make up for their terrible loss. Detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Brett Ryan. Brett Ryan was born in 1980 in Toronto into a large and close-knit family. There were 5 children in the family, and Brett was the second. He had 2 older brothers, Christopher and Leland, and a younger brother, AJ. Brett's parents always tried to instill the right values in their children by promoting a healthy lifestyle. Brett's father worked at a newspaper and was also a fitness trainer. His mother dedicated herself to homemaking and loved growing flowers. Brett's mother could be strict and harsh in raising her 4 sons, while his father was gentle and reserved. Each son in the family pursued his own path. After graduating from high school, Brett enrolled at the University of Toronto. However, he quickly struggled with his studies. After 2 painful breakups, Brett could not concentrate on his studies and eventually decided to drop out of university. Brett felt jealous as he watched his friends and classmates build relationships, get married, and achieve success in life. Meanwhile, he felt like he was not accomplishing anything significant, which made him feel like a failure. After getting a job as a painter, he realized that this career was not suitable for him. At the same time, Brett was concerned about his appearance, spending a lot of money on personal needs and on girls. As a result, he accumulated a large debt of up to 60,000 Canadian dollars, which he had no way to repay. When creditors started demanding money, Brett fell into a deep depression. He felt like a complete failure but did not dare to confess his problems to anyone. In desperation, Brett was determined to find a way out of his difficult situation and make a large sum of money quickly. He decided to rob a bank. On October 20, 2007, he put his plan into action. He chose a bank near his home and created a disguise by covering his face with bandages, pretending to have an injured left arm, limping, and carrying a stack of papers. Brett robbed his first bank by pretending to be sick. He entered and approached the cash register. There, he handed over a note demanding cash and warned the clerk that he was hiding a weapon. Out of fear, the clerk quickly gave Brett the money in the cash register. The amount was only about $1,000, which Brett was not happy about, but he decided not to attract any more attention. So he took the money and left the scene. Brett was caught on security cameras during the robbery. Despite this, he was not caught initially because he avoided using the same technique and changed his disguise each time. Instead of using fake bandages to look like a sick person, he wore a fake beard and hat to hide his identity. His next bank robberies achieved different results. Throughout his 12 bank robberies, Brett accumulated more than $28,000 in cash. He was always evasive, trying to avoid the police. Finally, on June 20, 2008, the police identified Brett, and he was arrested during his 13th attempted robbery. This surprised everyone because Brett had previously volunteered at a children's hospital and was now a robber. Brett was sentenced to 5 years in prison. During his sentence, experts conducted psychological evaluations and concluded that he showed no signs of aggression or violence. Additionally, Brett did not use illegal substances and did not suffer from mental disorders during his sentence. After 2 years, Brett was paroled for good behavior. The prison staff were impressed with him because he was a pleasant, charismatic, and hardworking young man. They felt that he had only made one serious mistake due to the pressure of debt and deserved the second chance. Brett's record showed that he was a model prisoner with a low risk of reoffending. Upon his release, Brett was required to attend a course of psychotherapy and report any problems he encountered in his family relationships or at work. This helped him avoid reoffending. However, the reality turned out to be much more complicated than Brett had anticipated. The debts were still outstanding, and he could not pay them off. Finding a job was also difficult because no one wanted to hire an ex-convict, even though he had skills in painting. In desperation, Brett declared bankruptcy. Fortunately, his parents supported him financially, allowing him to continue his studies at university, this time in information technology. Brett also continued to see a psychologist under court order and tried to stabilize his life. During therapy, Brett was advised to be more open and honest with the people around him. In September 2011, a friend of Brett's arranged a blind date with a girl named Kristen Baxter. Kristen was a physical therapist, lived alone in an apartment, and had a small dog. She also loved to travel. When Brett met Kristen, they immediately had a special connection. They quickly found they were compatible and attracted to each other. They both loved animals and traveling, which created a bond between them. Not long after, Brett and Kristen began a romantic relationship. Brett and Kristen spent a lot of time together, attending sporting events and hiking. They also went on a vacation together in the Bahamas with Kristen's family. Kristen's dog immediately took a liking to Brett, which made a good impression. Brett's life seemed to be back on track, and he no longer exhibited suspicious behavior. He longed for a quiet and cozy life with his beloved girlfriend. When Brett moved into Kristen's apartment in January 2013, their relationship entered a new phase. They began thinking about getting married. However, Brett was hiding a truth from Kristen. In reality, he was not the person she thought he was. While Brett's brothers were building their careers and becoming independent, he was just studying and living off his parents' money. He hid his real life and focused only on enjoying the vibrant city life with Kristen. They enjoyed going to cozy restaurants and swimming in the pool at night, but Brett never revealed the truth about his circumstances. Brett and Kristen often traveled to warm countries. However, their lives were turned upside down when Brett's father suddenly passed away. Brett moved in with his mother to help with the funeral arrangements and support her during this difficult time. During this period, Brett confessed to his mother, Susan, that he loved Kristen very much and dreamed of marrying her. However, he did not have enough money to buy a decent engagement ring, so he hesitated to propose. Brett's mother was touched by her son's words and gave him money to buy an expensive ring. With a luxurious diamond ring, Brett proposed to Kristen, and she accepted. The couple began to prepare for their wedding. However, Brett still had many worries about the future. He didn't know how he would support his family. He also had legal issues, bankruptcy, and debt that he hadn't disclosed to Kristen. To address these issues, Brett decided to focus on finding a decent, stable job. In early 2016, Brett finally found a good job in the IT field. He was very happy to share this news with Kristen, and they decided to celebrate with their families. However, everything changed when his new employer learned about his criminal past and fired him immediately. This took a serious toll on Brett's self-esteem. To avoid upsetting Kristen, Brett decided not to tell her about this failure. Instead, he lied and said that he would work remotely from home. Every day, when Kristen went to work, Brett would pretend to work on the computer. Kristen was very happy, thinking that Brett would start earning a lot of money and they would be able to stand on their own. Kristen started preparing for the wedding scheduled for September 16, 2016. She chose the most beautiful and expensive options they could afford. A luxurious banquet hall was booked for the ceremony, and the bachelor party before the wedding was to be held at a luxurious ski resort. The couple even started looking for a spacious and cozy house to settle down in after the wedding, as they were tired of living in a small apartment. Susan was extremely happy, thinking that her son was independent, had graduated from college, and had a high-paying job. She looked forward to the day when her son would get married and move into his own house. But the reality was completely the opposite. Brett had lied about all of this. He was trapped in his own fabricated thoughts and could not get out. In an effort to earn money, Brett took on any side job he could and even helped his mother with housework to earn money. He went to see his mother every day, looking for things to do and fixing things to get paid. Susan became suspicious when she saw her son hanging around the house all day, constantly doing this and that instead of going to work. If Brett made as much money as he claimed, why did he need these odd jobs? Susan began to ask her son difficult questions, which Brett initially tried to avoid. But then he remembered his therapist's advice about the importance of honesty, and finally dared to confess his troubles to his mother. He begged his mother for significant financial support, promising to continue looking for work. However, his mother was extremely disappointed and angry when she learned the truth. She refused to give him any money and threatened to tell Kristen everything. Brett was extremely angry at his mother's harsh words, and he feared that Kristen would leave him if she found out the truth. Brett was desperate because he didn't want to lose his girlfriend and have to move back in with his mother. He feared that if that happened, he would feel like a loser for the rest of his life. So he decided to carry out a strange plan. Unable to legally purchase a gun due to his criminal record, Brett chose to purchase a crossbow to avoid attracting unnecessary attention. he purchased the old crossbow with cash. The next day, Brett returned to his mother's house under the pretext of helping with home repairs to earn money. However, he had other intentions. On August 25, 2016, his mother, Kristen, woke up early as usual and went to work. Meanwhile, Brett stayed home and pretended to work. In reality, he was preparing for another act. To avoid suspicion, Brett created a keystroke automaton on his computer to give the impression that he was working. He also set up an automatic email function to send at a specific time to create an alibi. Next, Brett gathered all the necessary items for his disguise into a gym bag, including clothes and a wig. To avoid being caught on surveillance cameras, he sneaked out of the house through the fire escape and went to Susan's house incognito, wearing clothes and a wig so that no one would recognize him. However, when he reached the door, he took off all his disguises and went inside. Once inside, Brett tried to convince his mother to give him money. But Susan continued to refuse. A fierce argument broke out between them, with Susan demanding that Brett confess his lie to Kristen. Otherwise, she would expose him herself. As the argument became more heated, Susan sensed something was wrong. She took advantage of the moment when Brett stepped outside and called her eldest son, Chris. She begged Chris to come and help resolve the conflict with Brett. Brett returned to the garage for an important reason: he had hidden a crossbow there earlier. Once he found the weapon, he began to prepare everything for the shot. However, this required more time and effort than he had imagined. At that moment, his mother entered the garage in a rage. Brett quickly found a nearby tool and struck her twice, hitting her in the cheek and ear. She screamed in pain and shock at the sight of her own son attacking her. A fight broke out between them. During the scuffle, both fell to the floor and rolled around, knocking over everything in their path. In the chaos, Brett found a long, dirty rag, and without thinking much, he used it to strangle her. Only after carrying out this act did Brett realize that things had gone terribly wrong. His original murder plan had turned into a nightmare. He remembered that his brother Chris, who had been called by their mother, was about to arrive at the garage. Brett decided to remove his brother from the list of potential witnesses. He jumped up, grabbed the crossbow, and started preparing. A plan to kill Chris formed in Brett's mind. After preparing everything for the new crime, Brett hid in the garage, waiting for Chris. Soon, Chris entered the garage to find their mother, not knowing that he was in danger. Brett quietly approached Chris from behind and shot him in the back of the head. Chris fell immediately. Brett dragged his body close to their mother's and covered it with a tarp. Brett quickly changed his clothes and prepared to run away. However, he did not expect that his younger brother, AJ, was visiting and appeared at the door. For Brett, this was a disastrous situation. Brett began to consider his next move: run away after changing his clothes or stay and kill AJ. He feared that when his brother discovered the bodies, AJ would immediately call the police and he would be arrested. This fear drove Brett to commit another murder. After finding AJ, Brett followed him. Brett approached AJ with the intention of shooting him in the back of the head, just as he had done to Chris. However, this time things did not go as planned. AJ sensed danger and noticed that Brett was carrying a weapon. A scuffle broke out between the two brothers. During the fight, Brett attempted to injure AJ by shooting him in the neck with the crossbow. AJ screamed in pain and fled. He ran out of the house, leaving a trail of blood in the sand, and eventually collapsed from exhaustion in the driveway. It was then that Brett learned that there was another brother sleeping in the house, Leland, 39. He was awakened by AJ's terrified screams. Leland looked out the window and saw his brother covered in blood on the road. Panicked, he rushed to the phone to call 911 but couldn't make it. At that moment, Brett rushed at him in a frenzy. Leland and Brett started a fierce fight, spreading throughout the house and turning it into a bloody mess. Taking advantage of Brett's distraction, Leland sneaked out without being detected. He crawled to the neighbor's house and passed out right in front of it. The kind neighbors immediately called the police. Meanwhile, Brett angrily ran back to the yard and saw AJ, injured, trying to crawl away. Obsessed with the desire to kill his brother, Brett chased after AJ before the neighbors discovered him. However, while chasing AJ, Brett was surprised to find that Leland had told the neighbors everything. From that moment on, Brett had no chance to save himself. The police were about to arrive at the crime scene and put an end to his bloody journey. Brett's murder plan had failed. In desperation, Brett decided to surrender and returned to the house. There, he sat on the porch, holding a bottle of water, and waited for the police to arrive. When the police and ambulance arrived, paramedics confirmed that their mother and Chris had passed away. AJ still had signs of life, but his condition was critical. However, on the way to the hospital, AJ passed away due to his injuries. Leland, despite his serious injuries, survived. He was taken to the hospital for treatment and medical attention and gradually began to recover. Meanwhile, Brett was arrested at the scene of the crime and faced serious charges of first-degree murder and attempted murder of his brother. The news left Kristen reeling, especially since their wedding was only 3 weeks away. Kristen was devastated when she learned the truth about her lover. Brett's criminal past, including a robbery conviction, financial hardship, unemployment, and the horrific murder of his family, left her in disbelief. She wondered how she could have lived with this man all this time without knowing the truth. Kristen immediately called off the wedding and returned to her apartment. There, she discovered a strange device that Brett had made to create an alibi. Mistaking it for an explosive device, she panicked and called the police. The police quickly arrived at the scene, evacuated the residents of the building, and began to carefully examine the mysterious device. After a short time, they discovered that the device was just a clever invention of Brett's. Although initially concerned about the danger, the police later realized that the device was harmless. However, they were impressed by Brett's extraordinary ingenuity and care. His intelligence and inner strength were undeniable, but unfortunately, he used them for the wrong purpose. At trial, Brett pleaded guilty and made a deal with the prosecution. He admitted that his actions constituted second-degree murder and hoped for a lighter sentence. Brett explained that he only intended to use the crossbow to scare his mother and have a serious talk with her. He wanted his mother to finally understand and support him, but things got out of hand. Brett claimed that he had no intention of hurting his brothers, they were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. The prosecution believed that the defendant had planned to harm his mother from the beginning, not just stop at a conversation. They argued that Brett had brought the crossbow with the intention of killing Susan and should be held strictly responsible. As a result, he was convicted of first-degree murder of his mother and second-degree murder of his brother. The court handed down harsh sentences, 3 life terms with the possibility of parole after 25 years. In addition, Brett was sentenced to 10 years in prison for the attempted murder of his brother Leland. All sentences were to run concurrently, meaning he could only apply for early release after a quarter of a century. Brett's only surviving brother, Leland, received the sentence with relief. Despite the pain and bitterness of the loss, Leland truly respected Brett's remorse. In Leland's mind, his brother was not a bad person at heart but had lost his way in life. Brett had taken the path of deceit and was eventually mired in the quagmire of his own lies. He could no longer get out, which led to a terrible tragedy. Brett Ryan's terrifying story serves as a warning to us all. It demonstrates that small lies and the concealment of truth can lead to dire consequences. When we continue to lie, the lies grow and accumulate, becoming unmanageable. As a result, not only is the liar's life ruined, but so are the lives of their loved ones. Brett Ryan had the opportunity to change after his first prison sentence. He had the support of his girlfriend and a loving family, and he could have gone to school and found a job. However, he chose to lie, leading to a disastrous outcome and ruining more than one life. Whether Brett truly admitted his mistake or just wanted a lighter sentence is not as important as the lessons he learns while serving his life sentence. Can he look back on his life, reflect on his mistakes, and strive to become a better version of himself? Only Brett knows the answer. However, his story certainly makes us reflect on our own actions. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lucy Davis. Lucy Davis was born in 1971 in the picturesque town of Penimpryd, Wales. Her childhood was filled with love and warmth, thanks to her parents, Roger and Andre, who created a happy and comfortable home. Lucy grew up in the beautiful village of Glenk with her younger sister, Anna. Lucy took her first steps surrounded by majestic mountains and enchanting forests. Her kind nature and charming smile make her stand out, becoming a dynamic and special individual among those around her. Lucy easily gained the sympathy of her teachers and classmates. She developed a passion for horseback riding at a young age and had an endless love for horses. Seeing how eager Lucy was, her father arranged for her and her younger sister to take horse riding lessons with experienced instructors. They mastered the basics of this noble art, conquering challenges and overcoming obstacles. Lucy and Anna became skilled horse riders. Lucy Davis had a wonderful childhood in Wales, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the love of family and community, which helped her grow and develop. Lucy and Anna developed a passion for horse riding, which not only brought them companions but also taught them valuable life skills such as discipline, self-control, and responsibility. Their talent and perseverance earned them recognition at prestigious competitions, where they won multiple awards. However, Lucy's interests extended beyond horse riding. With a curious mind and a desire for knowledge, Lucy explored other passions, including music. She took flute and piano lessons, diligently honing her skills, and within a year, she had mastered both instruments, captivating audiences with her performances. This led to her joining the Glamorgan Youth Orchestra, where she continued to refine her musical talents. Lucy also participates in the school choir, which allows her to express her creativity and love of music. Lucy Davis's childhood was a balance of fun and dedication, marked by hard work and eager to learn. These qualities formed a strong base that would support her future successes and help her become an extraordinary person. In high school, Lucy became close friends with Garrick Jenkinson, a quiet and enigmatic young man from Wales. Despite not knowing much about his background, but they developed a strong and lasting connection. Garrett and Lucy became closer friends as time passed. However, Garrett secretly harbored romantic feelings for Lucy. After graduating from high school in 1998, Lucy pursued her passion for music and enrolled at the University of Yorkshire in Northern England. She initially aspired to become a music teacher but later realized her true desire was to create art in a major city. This realization led Lucy to meet Grimmy McAllister, whose perspective and humor aligned with hers. As their connection grew, Lucy introduced Grimmy to her parents, Roger and Andre. The introduction was a success, and Lucy's parents saw Grimmy as an ideal partner for their daughter. After careful consideration, Lucy and Grimmy chose to live together and start a family. In 1995, while in college, the couple had a son named James and Anne. To care for their child, Lucy took a break from her studies, while Grimmy continued his education and worked night shifts at the postal sorting department to support their family. Despite the challenges she faced, Lucy was hopeful about their future, driven by her love for her family and her aspirations for a better life. However, spending months at home with the baby took a toll on her, and she began to feel lonely. The fact that she and Grimmy rarely spent time together, due to his night shifts, made the problem even worse. Seeking companionship and someone to talk to, Lucy created a social media account under the nickname Miseria. This virtual outlet allowed her to share her experiences and connect with others. One user in particular caught her attention, Harold Landry, a 53 years old, he from Louisiana who had grown up in poverty and was fixated on achieving independence and success. Harold put in a lot of work and eventually came to an important insight. He understood that real wealth came not from owning oil wells, but from providing the essential tools and machinery needed to keep them running. With this insight, he founded a company that specializes in manufacturing hydraulic equipment for major oil companies in the southern United States. As his business thrived, Harold's fortunes grew, earning him not only financial security but also prestige and, eventually, the status of a billionaire. For Lucy, conversing with Harold was invigorating. She was captivated by his life experiences, dedication, and generosity. However, their relationship was not without its challenges. The significant gaps in their age, social standing, and lifestyle often caused friction between them. When Harold and Lucy first met, Harold's life seemed to be a confusing combination of luxury in many different experiences. He indulged in unusual hobbies, acquired luxury items, and owned real estate on KML Island in Mexico. There is no information about his previous marriages. He was married and divorced twice, but it is not known whether he had children from these marriages. Harold's life underwent a major transformation in 1992. Following his second divorce, he met Geraldine, a woman 20 years his junior, born in 1966 and originally from Mexico. At the time, Geraldine was married to Chris Price and had 2 children. Despite Geraldine being married, but Harold successfully captured her heart. On February 6, 1994, Harold planned a romantic dinner for Geraldine in New Orleans. They employed Christian Hurton as a babysitter for their children, giving them the opportunity to enjoy a romantic evening by themselves, free from childcare responsibilities. After dinner, Harold walked Geraldine home and then offered to drive Christian home as a thank you. Unbeknownst to Harold, Chris Price, Geraldine's husband, had been monitoring the couple's secret affair. Chris, who was watching from his car, decided to confront Harold. He chased after him, finally catching up at a red light. Chris rushed towards Harold, shouting accusations. Harold remained calm, pulled out a gun, and warned Chris to back off. Enraged, Chris dared Harold to shoot. Without hesitation, Harold fired, hitting Chris in the neck. Fortunately, Chris received prompt medical treatment from a nearby hospital, and which saved his life. In 1997, Harold was tried in St. Mary Parish Court for the attempted murder of Chris Price. His lawyer, Pete Fannin, argued that Harold was a victim of a setup. The jury found Harold guilty of aggravated assault with a weapon, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, after appealing, Harold was released on parole, required to pay a fine and perform community service. Harold was thankful to Pete for his assistance and they formed a friendship. Harold and Chris reached a settlement, but the details of the compensation were kept private. Harold then lived in Covington as a wealthy man, openly discussing his past with Lucy, including his previous failed marriages and a traumatic incident. Lucy became more attracted to Harold after he shared his secrets. She was captivated by his persuasive nature. After Lucy ended her relationship with Grimmy, she and Harold chose to start dating. To shield them from unwanted issues, Harold aimed to steer clear of trouble. In early 2000, Harold visited England to meet Lucy's parents, Roger and Andre. Although they were initially surprised by the age gap, they supported their daughter's decision and didn't meddle in the relationship. Harold gave Lucy many costly presents because he wanted to fulfill all her wishes. His love was intense, and he contemplated marriage, but wanted everything to be flawless. Harold plans a trip to Mexico to strengthen his relationship, inviting Lucy, her son James, and her ex-husband Grimmy to join them on this special journey. Mexico was a paradise for Harold, and having his friend and lawyer Pete's apartment nearby added to the trip's comfort. Harold had recently bought a diamond engagement ring and shared the news with Pete. However, Pete suspected Lucy was cheating on Harold due to her frequent meetings with Grimmy. Despite Pete's warnings, Harold proposed to Lucy, blinded by his love for her. She accepted his proposal. In mid-2003, Harold and Lucy got married. Harold purchased $1 million home in Warshire County, and they started a new life together. Their neighbors, Rachel Clark and Stephen Kennedy, were friendly and helped them feel welcome in the area. After the wedding, Lucy gave birth to a daughter named Harth. Harold also welcomed James, Lucy's son from her previous marriage, into their family and treated him as his own. Over time, Lucy and Harold's relationship began to deteriorate. Harold became increasingly controlling, expecting Lucy to obey him completely. However, Lucy was an independent person and refused to comply with Harold's demands. As a result, arguments and disagreements became more frequent, creating a tense atmosphere at home. Their son, James, had a difficult and unhappy childhood due to his family's stressful environment. Lucy and Harold's relationship was deteriorating, and their neighbors took notice. The situation was made worse by their growing reliance on alcohol, which added to their existing problems. However, when the arguing and shouting stopped, neighbors thought the couple was trying to resolve their issues. In 2009, Lucy reconnected with her old school friend Garrett on social media. Their online conversations became a source of comfort for Lucy during a difficult time in her life. As Harold sensed Lucy's growing distance, he realized she was seeking solace in another man. Not wanting to confront the situation, Harold left for Mexico, leaving Lucy alone. During his absence, Lucy invited Garrett to visit. Harold was surprised when he got home. Shortly after, Lucy filed for divorce. And Harold began an affair with their neighbor, Rachel. Harold and Lucy's divorce proceedings were complicated by disagreements over dividing their assets. Lucy wanted to keep the family home for the sake of their children, while Harold was adamant that they sell it and offered her a financial settlement instead. The situation between Lucy and Harold became increasingly heated, and Lucy revealed some of Harold's past secrets. When Lucy returns home, the arguments continue, and the tension between her and Harold causes Jameson and Harth much suffering. On the evening of Monday, February 1, 2010, Harold was drinking wine when a package intended for his neighbor, Stephen Kennedy, was mistakenly delivered to his address. Later that evening, around 9 p.m., Stephen stopped by Harold's house to collect his package after noticing the delivery notification. Upon arriving, Stephen was greeted by Harold, then Harold offered him a glass of wine. Although Harold had already been drinking and was visibly intoxicated, Stephen accepted the offer. After a brief visit, during which he collected his package and exchanged greetings with Lucy, and Stephen left. Harold and Lucy's argument soon resumed, this time centering on Lucy's plans to buy furniture for her new home. James rushed into the kitchen after hearing a commotion and witnessed Harold physically abusing his mother with a kitchen utensil. James immediately called the police and comforted his younger sister. Meanwhile, Lucy grabbed the children and attempted to escape the house, heading to Stephen's residence in search of help. However, Harold caught up with her during the escape and violently attacked her with a knife, stabbing her in the chest. He then dragged her body under a nearby bush, attempting to conceal the crime. Upon hearing the screams, Stephen rushed outside and discovered Lucy's lifeless body. Initially, he thought she had fainted, but soon realized the gravity of the situation. Police officer Steve C. Fox arrived at the crime scene and immediately called for an ambulance. He then began searching the neighborhood for Harold, but unfortunately, he was unable to find Harold. The children, traumatized and frightened, hid in the house until the police arrived. A tragic incident drastically altered the family's life, leading to a prolonged and challenging struggle for justice. An ambulance quickly arrived and transported Lucy to Yorkshire Hospital, but unfortunately, she succumbed after to the hospital. At the same time, a fearful Harold knocked on his friend Rachel's door, his voice shaking. He confessed to doing something terrible, but didn't reveal what it was. Harold then gave Rachel a large sum of money, $40,000, along with all his cash, car keys, and paychecks. After that, he headed home. Meanwhile, the police were searching for Harold. They scoured the streets, interviewed witnesses, but he seemed to have vanished. However, luck eventually turned in the detectives' favor, and Harold was arrested on his way back from Rachel's house. His face, filled with fear and remorse, was telling. Lucy's family, including her parents Roger and Andre, were overcome with grief. In a statement to the press, they expressed their profound sorrow at the loss of their daughter and chose not to make any additional comments. The forensic examination confirmed that Lucy died from multiple stab wounds to the chest. The investigation relied heavily on evidence discovered at the crime scene and a key eyewitness account from James, Lucy's son, who saw the tragic event unfold. February 24, 2011, was a day of tension in the courtroom, as everyone waited anxiously for the verdict in the trial of 64-year-old Harold Landry, who was accused of murdering his 38-year-old wife, Lucy. The jury had just delivered their guilty verdict, and the air was thick with bitterness and loss. Harold should have been Lucy's rock and protector, stood accused of her murder. His lawyer and friend, Pete, had passed the case to experienced attorney Andy Child, who faced an uphill battle in defending Harold. The defense's task was to convince the court that Harold never intended to take Lucy's life. The defense claimed that Harold acted in response to Lucy's aggressive behavior. Overcome with emotion, Harold swore he loved his wife and was consumed by remorse, insisting he never meant to hurt her. As part of his defense strategy, he pleaded guilty to manslaughter in connection with Lucy's death. However, the prosecution presented damning evidence, including disturbing photographs of multiple wounds on Lucy's body. The brutality of Harold's attack left no doubt about his guilt. After a thorough review of the evidence, the court delivered its verdict. Harold Landry was found guilty of Lucy's death and sentenced to life in prison. He must serve 16 years before being eligible for parole, at which point he will be 82 years old. The story of Harold and Lucy is a tragic love story. Although the trial is over, the consequences of this tragedy still linger. Lucy's parents, Roger and Andre, felt that the verdict was fair, but it did not alleviate their grief. Meanwhile, Harold Landry maintained his innocence and vowed to appeal the decision. He claimed that he would not change anything, even with the benefit of hindsight. Harold has been held accountable for his actions. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jason Corbett. Jason Corbett, a 39-year-old Irish businessman, Jason has a warm, friendly personality. Born in Limerick, Ireland, Jason has a twin brother named Wayne and an older sister named Tracy. He married Margaret Fitzpatrick in 2003 when he was 27. They later welcomed 2 children, a son named Jack and a daughter named Sarah, whom they loved dearly. Jason's family seemed to be living a happy life in Ireland, but this happiness was short-lived. Tragedy struck in 2006, shortly after Sarah was born. Margaret suffered a severe asthma attack one night, waking Jason up because she was having trouble breathing. Jason immediately tried to help her by giving her medication and using her inhaler, but her condition quickly worsened. In a panic, Jason called an ambulance, but unfortunately, Margaret died on the way to the hospital. Jason Corbett was the director of a small packaging company in Ireland when he lost his wife, leaving him to raise his 2-year-old son and 3-month-old daughter alone. His friends witnessed his deep sadness and struggled to cope with the loss. A year after his wife's death, Jason was looking for a nanny and housekeeper to care for his children. This led him to Molly Martins, a 25-year-old American woman. In March 2008, Molly moved from the United States to Ireland to take up a nanny job. A friend of Jason's accompanied him to the airport to pick Molly up. The friend immediately became concerned that Molly might not be suitable for the job. Molly's youthful appearance, flashy style, and heavy makeup aroused suspicion. With her bright jacket, cowboy boots, curly hair, and heavy makeup, Molly looks more like a stage performer than a responsible nanny and maid. Molly was born and raised in Knoxville, Tennessee. After attending Clemson University for a while, she dropped out and decided to start a new life in Ireland. There, she worked as a nanny for Jason's family, taking care of his 2 children, Jack and Sarah. Molly immediately took to the children, showing them care and concern. Jason's friends noticed a significant change in him. He seemed to be coming back to life after a period of grief. As Molly and Jason's relationship deepened, love blossomed and they began dating. The family of 4 went on vacations together, which brought them closer together. They began to plan for their future as a family. 2 years later, on Valentine's Day 2010, Jason took Molly to a coffee shop, where he proposed to her with a ring. Overjoyed, Molly immediately began planning their wedding in the United States. She also convinced Jason to leave Ireland and move to the United States with her, and he agreed. In 2011, Jason sold his house, moved to the United States for work, and the family settled in Davidson County, North Carolina. The couple married in a beautiful ceremony attended by friends and family from both the United States and Ireland. After the wedding, Molly worked as a swimming instructor. But her main focus was raising Jack and Sarah. Jason, on the other hand, worked as a manager in the United States. At first, their life seemed perfect, but as time went on, their marriage began to fall apart. On August 1, 2015, Molly's parents, Tom and Sharon Martins, visited Jason's family home, where he greeted them at the entrance and helped them with their luggage. Tom had brought a gift for Jason's son, Jack, a baseball bat, but Jack was out with friends at the time. Instead, Jason, Molly, her parents, and Sarah had dinner together, eating pizza. Jack returned home late that night, but Tom decided to wait until the next morning to give him the baseball bat. After 11 p.m., the family went to bed. Molly and Jason were in the master bedroom on the first floor, while their children, Jack and Sarah, were in nearby rooms. Molly's parents were upstairs in the living room. Hours later, at 3 a.m., Molly's father, Tom, called 911 in a panic. He claimed that Jason had attacked his daughter, Molly, and in response, Tom had hit Jason with a baseball bat. Jason was now unconscious and bleeding. During the call, Tom expressed his fear that Jason's severe head injuries could be fatal and urgently requested an ambulance to their location. Tom asked the 911 operator for help, and she instructed Tom and Molly to perform CPR to try to revive Jason until paramedics arrived. When the police and ambulance arrived, they found Molly in the yard near a car, looking distressed and shocked but not crying. Inside the house, they discovered Jason Corbett's body in the master bedroom, surrounded by blood splattered on the bed, walls, and floor. Tom and Molly both had blood on their clothes. A baseball bat and a large pebble with blood on them were found near Jason, along with an overturned lamp. Jack and Sarah had been sleeping in their room during the incident. At the police station, Tom Martins, 66, a 30-year veteran of the FBI, stated that his son-in-law was mentally unstable and had been abusing his daughter. According to Tom, Jason had been drunk that night. Everyone had gone to bed, but Tom was awakened in the middle of the night by screams and loud voices coming from downstairs. He quickly got out of bed, grabbed a baseball bat, and ran down the stairs. When Tom entered the master bedroom, he found Jason strangling Molly with both hands. Tom yelled, "Let her go." In response, Jason turned to him and said, "I'm going to kill her." Tom and Molly did not deny their involvement in Jason's death but claimed they had acted in self-defense. Tom immediately felt the need to protect himself and those around him. He swung the baseball bat at Jason, but the blow seemed to have no effect. When Jason tried to drag Molly into the bathroom, Tom intervened, trying to stop him. The situation worsened when Jason pushed Tom, causing him to fall and his glasses to fly off. At this point, Tom felt his life was in danger. Jason then spotted the baseball bat on the floor and reached for it. Molly quickly responded by grabbing a rock and hitting Jason in the head, yelling, "Don't touch my dad," as she did so. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Tom picked up the baseball bat and repeatedly hit Jason until he fell to the floor. Molly, 32, provided a consistent account of events during her interview. She explained that her daughter Sarah woke up with a nightmare that night, which caused Jason to become angry and attack her. Jason allegedly began strangling Molly, threatening to kill her, and her father intervened to protect her. In order to protect her father, Molly claimed to have hit Jason on the head with a heavy rock. When asked where she got the rock, Molly replied that she had placed it on her bedside table. The rock had originally been used for drawing pictures with children as part of a gardening project, but Molly could not remember exactly how many times she had hit Jason, describing the incident as a desperate fight for her life. During her interview, Molly told police that she was still in pain from the alleged strangling incident. Photos of Molly, which showed a red mark in the middle of her neck, were compared to photos taken of her when she was arrested. However, the comparison did not reveal any red marks on her neck at the time of her arrest. Molly later admitted that the fight with her husband had actually occurred the day before the tragedy, in which Jason had grabbed her arm and neck. During questioning, she repeatedly complained of a sore throat. Both Molly and her father, Tom, testified that Jason had abused his wife, but Jason's family disputed these claims. Jason's sister, Tracy, noticed that Molly was controlling of Jason, often becoming upset if things did not go her way. She also noticed that Molly did not want to socialize with Jason's family members when they visited. Additionally, one of Molly's friends shared a disturbing claim that Molly had claimed to be friends with Jason's first wife, Margaret, until her death. However, this contradicted the family's account, as they knew Margaret had died of an asthma attack, not cancer. Despite Jason's relatives' warnings and attempts to intervene about Molly's unusual behavior, the wedding still takes place, marking the beginning of a complicated and troubled marriage. Over time, Molly's behavior began to raise concerns. Jason noticed a major change in her personality and suspected that she might have mental health issues. She was initially kind and loving, but now seemed manipulative and controlling. This worried Jason and led to more problems in their relationship. Molly began distancing herself from Jason's family by cutting her phone calls to just seconds. Before her death, Jason took steps to protect his children, Jack and Sarah. He named his sister, Tracy, as their legal guardian in case anything happened to him. Tracy knew that if Jason died, Molly would have custody of the children. After Jason's death, Tracy traveled to North Carolina to file for custody, preparing for a legal battle with Molly. During her troubled marriage to Jason, Molly consulted with an attorney to understand her rights to Jason's children in the event of a divorce. The lawyer suggested that she record their arguments and gather evidence that could be used against Jason. As a result, Molly began secretly recording their conversations. In these recordings, Molly appeared unresponsive, often ignoring Jason's repeated questions as his voice grew louder. After Jason's death, Molly confided in a close friend about her marital problems, describing Jason as controlling and abusive. She accused him of forcing her to have sex, verbally abusing her, and becoming increasingly aggressive toward her over time. Despite this, Molly never reported Jason's behavior to the police. For days after Jason's death, his 10-year-old son Jack and 8-year-old daughter Sarah were interviewed by a child welfare specialist. During the conversation, they shared their thoughts about their parents' relationship. The children described seeing their mother, Molly, being careful not to wake their father, Jason, for fear of him getting angry. Jack described a pebble on his parents' bedside table, explaining that they had brought it in because it was raining and planned to decorate it later. Both Jack and Sarah described witnessing arguments between them. According to the children, their father, Jason, often initiated these arguments, which included hitting, pushing, and swearing at his mother, Molly, over trivial matters. Jason's autopsy report found that he died of traumatic brain injury. He had suffered approximately 12 severe blows to the head with a baseball bat and a rock, all concentrated in the same area. The injuries were so severe that his scalp was torn away from his skull and his skull was fractured. A toxicology report found that Jason's blood alcohol level was slightly higher than normal at the time of his death. He also had traces of trazodone, an antidepressant commonly prescribed to treat insomnia, in his body. Jason was buried in his hometown of Limerick, Ireland, next to his first wife, Margaret. After Jason's death, his sister, Tracy, took their children, Jack and Sarah, to Ireland, which left Molly shocked and heartbroken. She tried to contact Jack and Sarah by phone and social media. Molly and Tom claimed they acted in self-defense against Jason, but the investigation into his death continues. Tracy has another theory. She thinks Molly killed Jason because he planned to leave her and take their children. Tracy believes that Jason told Molly about his decision on the night of the incident, and Molly, afraid of being alone, reacted violently. In Ireland, Jack and Sarah slowly adjust to their new lives. 9 months after their father's death, they revealed that they were forced to lie about domestic violence. They admit that Molly made up stories about their father's violent behavior, threatening to cut them off if they did not comply. The children clarify that their father had never abused Molly, contrary to what they had initially said. During the investigation, Molly's past relationship with her ex-husband Keith Megan came to light. Keith shared some revealing details about Molly's past. The two met on a dating website and quickly fell in love, moving in together just 6 weeks later. Keith described Molly as independent, fun-loving, carefree and unconventional. However, she eventually confided in him about her struggles with bipolar disorder. Keith was not overly concerned by the revelation, as Molly was on medication and appeared to be fine, apart from occasional changes in her behavior when she missed a dose. These changes did not manifest as violence or outbursts, but rather as clingy behavior during arguments, such as refusing to let Keith leave. Additionally, Molly would often spend hours in the bath, followed by periods of sitting on the cold floor and crying. Despite the difficulties they faced, Keith and Molly continued their life together and decided not to have children at that time. However, Molly soon revealed that she was pregnant, which took Keith by surprise. As the sole breadwinner, Keith was struggling financially and did not feel ready to become a father. Keith eventually proposed to Molly and she happily accepted, but due to her health problems, Molly continued to take prescription medication, including antidepressants, sometimes up to 16 pills a day. This caused Keith to worry about the effects of the medication on their unborn child. In a tragic turn of events, Molly had a dream that she had lost her baby, and the next day the hospital confirmed that the fetus had died. The loss put further strain on their relationship. Molly fell into a state of grief and was diagnosed with major depression. Her parents began to view Keith negatively, seeing him as the cause of Molly's problems. Molly planned to leave Keith in the United States to find work as a nanny for the family in Europe. In March 2008, she packed her things and moved out of the apartment they were sharing. 10 days later, she called Keith, telling him that she was in Ireland, had found a job, and was doing well. This was the last time they spoke. Years later, in October 2015, Keith received an email from a police officer in North Carolina revealing that Molly had kept her relationship with Keith and her move to Europe a secret. The email informed Keith that Molly's new husband, Jason Corbett, had been murdered. When Keith watched an interview with Molly and her father, Tom, they described Jason as a cruel person, but Keith did not believe their story. He thought their feelings seemed fake. In January 2016, Tom and Molly were charged with second-degree murder in Jason's death. At their trial in July 2017, Tom and Molly claimed they had acted in self-defense when they killed Jason. Tom said he had tried everything he could to keep himself and Molly safe. Tom admitted to beating Jason with a baseball bat, only stopping when he was sure Jason was no longer a threat. However, the prosecution argued that the severity of the attack showed a deep hatred for Jason rather than self-defense. Analysis of the bloodstains showed that some of the blows were delivered when Jason's head was between 30 and 50 centimeters above the ground, suggesting that Tom continued to attack even after Jason was no longer a threat. The presence of stains on Molly's nightgown near the area where Jason was struck suggests that she was nearby during the attack. During the trial, Lieutenant Frank Young testified about the injuries he observed on Tom and Molly on the night of the incident. He stated that Molly had self-inflicted wounds to her neck, telling her to stop while he was taking notes on her injuries. Other than some dried blood on her face and hair, Lieutenant Young found no other injuries on Molly. Tom also had no injuries, only blood on his watch and under his fingernails. Notably, his glasses were not broken. Paramedic Amanda Hackworth also took the stand and described what she found when she arrived at the scene. When she examined Jason's body, she found that his torso was cold to the touch and had patches of dried blood. This contradicts Molly's statement that they called 911 immediately after Jason became unconscious. The police investigation discovered that Jason had a life insurance policy, with Molly listed as the beneficiary. Furthermore, it was revealed that Jason had financially supported Molly's parents. A neighbor of Jason's family testified at the trial. He recalled spending an evening with Jason, from 3:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m., drinking beer together. According to the neighbor, Jason seemed very relaxed at the time. The neighbor also witnessed Tom and his wife arriving at Jason's house, and noted that Jason warmly welcomed them and helped them carry heavy luggage into the house. After 9 days of witness testimony, listening to arguments, and viewing haunting crime scene photos, the jury reached a verdict within 3 hours. The court found Molly Corbett and her father, Tom Martins, guilty of second-degree murder. Molly was sentenced to 20 years in prison, while her father was sentenced to 25 years in prison. As the verdict was read, Molly turned to her mother, expressing remorse.